once intended as a student film was just merely seen as a film. Full stop. You moved to LA where you rewrote schlock like The Last Exorcism Part 2 or 10 Cloverfield Lane, and you learned about momentum, how to keep the producer turning the page. You doctored scripts and taught yourself how to manipulate the guys with the power, the guys with the money. It wasn't performing jazz, it was writing a pop song. And you are a jazz musician. As such, your second film, a jazz thriller, injected the adrenaline that you now add on tap, and it was a pleasurable slap across the face, a wake-up call to let everyone know that you'd arrived. Your third film, a musical about struggling creatives in LA, was such a cultural landmark that it nearly brute-forced itself into a Best Picture win. And, I mean, let's just say it. Fuck the votes. Fuck that name on the card. You know you won. History agrees. Your fourth film, an interstellar biopic, was a chance for every failed artist to furiously declare that you were just a boy, not the boy genius you had been crowned. Your first foray into TV, where you executive produced and directed some streaming episodes, was buried so aggressively by Netflix, you could have titled it Ted Sarandos was on Epstein's flight logs, and they would have handled the show in the exact same way. Then, right when they were ready to crown a new boy genius, you woke everyone up. For so long, you were the auteur who did what he was told. You awkwardly stood along the wall at those Oscar parties as guys who once promised to read your script, then never did, were now asking what you were working on, and they had a hunger in their eyes. You answered the same questions over and over and over again on those junkets, providing answers so sterile they couldn't possibly cause trouble for your film. You let scripts that you had been working on get optioned to be made by other directors. That Taken ripoff was now desirable. You sat in those panel discussions like a good little boy, even when they sat you next to Mel Gibson. You did everything you were told to do, and you wondered if that last space setback would keep you from realizing a decade-long passion project. At the most crucial point in your career, you stopped caring about the business and renewed your love affair with the art. You are the boy genius, Damien Chazelle, and this is your Babylon. My introduction to the boy genius came after Guy and Madeline had been released, and La La Land had already completed its theatrical run. 6 years ago, a girl who I had annoyed with my friendship in the past sent me a YouTube clip titled La La Land 2017, Sebastian Explains Jazz to Mia, and noted that this was the type of rant I would subject her to. The reason why I had to perform such a rant is that I force women to watch Woody Allen movies. It's just what I do. If I have to watch your dumbass reality show where they take a woman from the South Pole and a man from the North Pole and they have to long distance date and then in the final episode they meet at the equator to see if they want to fuck or not, then we're going to have to watch anything else. Again. I'm going to put on Match Point as foreplay. We're going to watch Stardust Memories, and I'm going to point at the screen during the Woody and Charlotte Rampling scenes, and I'm going to rant, see, we're a perfectly matched couple, just like in the movies. I didn't always love jazz, but I've always loved Woody Allen movies, and hating jazz and being a Woody Allen fan is like hating Justin Horowitz and being a Damien Chazelle fan. The jazz is coming along for the ride, so either teach yourself to love it, or suffer a diminished experience every time out. Anyone who loves jazz will tell you that once you get jazz, it melts into your life almost effortlessly. It can be energizing or meditative or a little kick to an otherwise stale dinner. It's a good soundtrack, but it's also so much more than that. When I got to college, there were always two young guys at the Seton Hall Caf on the weekend mornings scoring our meals to simple guitar noodling and an upright bass. This setup is not ideal if you have a hangover, which I always did, but if you have a book and enough coffee in your veins that your blood is running brown, then the jazz drowns out the conversations and you can really fall into a novel. At a table far enough away from the salad bar that I didn't attract attention, I would listen to this jazz and write my first novel, Love Trust, in the same notebook that I would bring to class with me on Monday to take notes in managerial accounting. Sometimes in managerial accounting, I would continue writing the novel. You can really begin to appreciate jazz when the other white noise that you're writing to is a high-level explainer on unamortized bond discounts. The scene that my friend sent me from La La Land began on a stark backlot. On display was Ryan Gosling's uncanny ability to make his lines sound improv in their delivery, but written in their preciseness. When Emma Stone declares that she hates jazz, Gosling performs the same type of abduction that I do when girls who despise my very limited interests start to protest them or discount them. I'm generally a decade older than whoever I'm in love with, so I always feel it necessary to show them whatever cool thing they hate is just something they haven't truly felt before. They might have encountered it or experienced it, but they have not felt it. The abduction lands Emma Stone in a jazz club, and Ryan gives her context as to where jazz comes from, and how it serves as a language that you can be fluent in if you listen close enough and try to find out what it's communicating. Emma Stone counters this with a reductive question, minimizing the art form to its worst example, as Ryan bites his fist. Redirecting her attention, making sure the jazz isn't only a background score to their conversation, Ryan points to the stage and explains what's going on, just like one might explain the rules of a sport so that the skill of the players and the stakes of their passion is linked and can funnel back to the spectator. He's every football-loving boyfriend this season telling his Swiftie girlfriend why Kadarius Toney lining up in the neutral zone and drawing a penalty wasn't just an oopsie, it was a Hall of Fame play erasing catastrophic fuck-up by a guy who the Giants wasted a first-round pick on, despite the fact that if we didn't trade back, Micah Parsons was right there and... Oh no. Tommy is back on his football rant. If one thing stays consistent on these podcasts, it's me being angry about football. I mean, as you can see, the passion I have for the Giants fucking up is something that I fostered by devoting time to the team and understanding the intricacies. And this is exactly what I do with the girls I meet, and what Ryan does with Emma. I love this scene from La La Land, and in a weird twist, I realized that I had to open myself up to musicals more. It was a lesson for me, too. I couldn't just keep forcing people to only watch Everyone Says I Love You, or breaking into song every Christmas to horrify my progressive mom with a one-man performance of the minstrel show number from White Christmas. I needed to look deeper into a musical. And La La Land was right there. I bought it on Amazon and watched it the same night. In the spirit of jazz, and because you came here to listen to an essay on Babylon, here is La La Land in the fragments that I remember. I remember that opening highway scene, which makes me wish a Michael Bay movie broke out and a tractor trailer lost its brakes. I just want like a rapturous cleansing of LA when I see that scene. But I stuck with it. And then I came to the audition scene, and Emma did everything she could to get to, and then only became seen in distant glances. It was the chorus of noise that colors multiple roommate living. And it was that LA that Emma Stone could walk at night and not pass a single homeless person. It was the artless artist apartment with its dirty, once white walls. It was the artist making money from his art by being told to avoid doing his art in favor of doing what's expected of him. It was the suburban boyish need to say fuck you to your boss who's just trying to get through the night. It was being so far up your own ass that you shoulder past the love of your life. It was the Chester Frenchish pool party performance, and that yellow dress, and the view, and breaking into song from the excitement of maybe finding your person that can't be described accurately in conversation, so you have to dance, you have to sing. It's the only way to express that feeling. It's the thrill when she suddenly knows the words to the song you're singing, and you finally have a dance partner. It's the magic of being on set. It's the whole jazz thing, more dry auditions and judging eyes, the classic cucked finance bro boyfriend being dropped for the art ho boyfriend. It's the movie date that seems to play out scenes from your future on the screen. It's a little breaking and entering as a treat. It's the levitating exaltation of feeling like the world revolves around the little universe that you've created with your other special person. And it's summer in the city, and it's watching that tap and trumpet whip pan that Damien first used in Guy and Madeline. It's that soul-crushing presence of John Legend, a reminder that the hot girl who sweeps you off your feet can eventually become Chrissy Teigen. It's the question of, are people going to like it? And the correct answer of, fuck 'em. It's that feeling of commiserating with your person about your dream and them having the audacity to have better ideas than what you do, so you have to fight for your dumbass idea because if she's right, then it's not just your dream, it's a communal dream. It's the vertigo lighting and the duet at the piano. It's the same lighting and suddenly they aren't singing the same song anymore. It's your girl being like, this opportunity is amazing, and talking you into it, but then giving you shit when the practicalities of the decision annoy her. But even if you had chosen it to do it your way, and the money wasn't coming in, she'd give you the exact same amount of shit and the reasons would shift. And then there's the failure of live theater where if people don't show up, it doesn't matter how good your performance is, it just evaporates into nothingness. Where at least with a book, it can sit on a shelf, and when I have a heart attack in 10 years, I can go out on the fantasy that, like, oh, people are going to read me once I'm gone, like all the other people before me. And it's a cope, but I won't be around to know if it's not true. With live theater, you're there, you're on the stage, you're looking out in the crowd, and you know if the seat is full or not. And with that failure comes a moment where you need to change your dreams, and maybe even grow up. And it's that little push that you need to continue on. And when you do, you find yourself making it more personal. And as you make it more personal, you begin to sing like you haven't before. It works out, and then sometimes it doesn't work out. And it's Sebastian's, I know, outside the observatory. It's the family that isn't Sebastian's. It's the ad with Mia's face that Sebastian passes when he goes into the club. It's the jazz that pulls Emma forward, and the glow of that sign cooking that same face from the ad like it's chicken. It's beautiful jazz that tells a story. You see the life that could have been. You see the life that is. And it's that glance back. Oh, that glance back. She blinks a goodbye. He nods goodbye. The end. La La Land is one of those movies that treats music as the life-altering gift that those of us who truly listen know it to be. Seeing Sebastian at the piano and understanding that it was his way to express himself and bring people together and maybe show off a little to a girl reminds me of an experience I had around the same time I saw Babylon. And yes, don't worry, I haven't forgotten about the point of this podcast, but if Babylon has taught us anything, it's that digressions have value. So, there's this mall called the Livingston Mall that I've been going to for the past 18 years to write. I used to write at the Roy Rogers because it had the cheapest coffee in the mall, but it closed. So then I wrote in the food court after getting a coffee from Seattle's Best, but then the Seattle's Best closed, and so now I buy coffee from the Barnes & Noble Starbucks, which doesn't take fucking Starbucks gift cards for some unknown reason. Like, you're a Starbucks, and this gift card is for Starbucks, but they're always like, oh, we can't. And so, I need coffee, and so I buy the coffee, but being there in the Barnes & Noble reminds me of like when I was broke and I had to rent the books that I wanted to read by buying a coffee and then trying not to overstay my welcome there. So I always take my Barnes & Noble Starbucks and then go up to the food court. And this particular time, once I got my coffee, I walked out of Barnes & Noble, and in order to get to the food court, it's on the second floor. Barnes & Noble's on the first, so I have to walk a little bit, and they always have these pianos that are for sale just out in the open atrium type area. And I was walking by the pianos at this time, and there's this little Asian kid with his girlfriend, and he's like a teenager, and he walks over to one of the pianos and he sits down, and his girlfriend is standing there beside him, not filming on her phone or anything, but it's almost like she knew what was coming. And he starts playing, and it's not hot cross buns or some easy stuff. It's the type of stuff that Sebastian would be playing. And so I stop walking, and my coffee's burning my hands even through that little cardboard thing that's supposed to keep your hands from burning. But, nothing works about this Starbucks, so I just charge it to the game on that. And I start listening to him. I sort of get lost in the music, and as I'm listening, more and more people are showing up around me and coming out of Barnes & Noble and standing around this piano. And by the end of the song that he's playing, it's like this mall has been restored to the amount of people that I used to see in there back when the Roy Rogers was open, where like he transported us back to the past. And this isn't a dead mall, it's a vibrant mall, and people are all standing around there. And it's a experience that's almost out of time. And he begins playing another song and everyone stays, you know, no one moves on. We all want to listen to this and we all recognize this moment. And he just started himself. No one even asked for it. We all just found ourselves in this situation and we listened to it, and he finishes his song and his girlfriend applauds, and then all of us applaud, and he gets up from the piano, and you know, no one was filming it on their phone or anything. And it's like this moment didn't exist and we all disperse. And then the mall goes back to being this dead mall. And I walk by the vacant stores and I get on the escalator and I'm the only one there. And I go up to the half empty food court and sit down with my coffee. And it was like this striking moment where the boy at the piano changed the space we were in, transporting it back to what it once was. And when he stopped playing, the spell was broken and we applauded, and that was it. And it's this intense type of feeling that music can provoke that also made me check out Damien's other work. And so immediately the next thing I went to was Whiplash. And the power of Whiplash is that it had to be a movie. Like, it wouldn't be as striking as a short story or a novel or a musical on stage, because you had to be intimately close in some moments. And then you almost had to watch from a distance as, you know, Miles is just destroying those drums. And Damien had all of his naivete from Guy and Madeline and all of his lived experience as a drummer. And finally he had actors that were above what his skill level was. So it made him go to the next level as well. And I'm not even going to spend time here describing Whiplash, because it's like being told what sex would be like with your crush instead of like actually experiencing it, where, you know, you probably won't be able to experience sex with your crush, but you will be able to experience Whiplash, because I bought it on Amazon Prime Video for, you know, $14 or something like that. And that's way cheaper than a date. So why don't you go have a date with Whiplash and then come back to this podcast when you're done? But the point is, I was impressed by Whiplash. And so I was like, wow, this is a great first film. And then I found out it wasn't his first film. And that's when I realized that Guy and Madeline on a Park Bench existed. But, I mean, did it exist? Like, this was before Mubi, so I couldn't really find the full movie. I could only watch it in clips. And it was the teaser trailer that sort of screamed student film, but showed so much of Damien's ambition. It was jazz and cinema and jazz and cinema, and, you know, the two-hander that the boy genius loves to stroke, and he's so good at it. Even when he was starting out, he was good at it. But there was this Babylon-esque trailer where it didn't give the viewer any idea of what they were going to see. You know, it gave them nothing to hold on to. There was no hint of a plot. There were reviews, but it's like, you know, at this point, getting good reviews, it doesn't mean that you made something good. It just means you made something like acceptable to whatever the current thing is. So it doesn't hold any weight. But I found a clip, and the first actual clip I found was this girl with a cute gap in her teeth, and she's walking through a busy park, and through her song, she fully explains the plot. Like, this clip should have been the trailer for the movie, because it brings the viewer up to speed. It's all exposition, but it's exposition that's so pleasurable. Like, the sound mix isn't great, and maybe that's to hide the girl's voice, but the magic is there. And so I went and I found another clip. And this third clip was the longest of the bunch I could find, and it features like the quintessential theater kid, ponytail and all, and he's performing at what might be a party or might be like a studio session. There's a bunch of people standing around, and he's sort of regaling the party with his performance, and it's one shot. And, you know, with an indie film, sometimes the easiest choice is also the most complicated choice. And it's genuinely impressive that Chazelle chooses to shoot this unbroken, where he could have done a close-up on the feet so that they could get the tap dancing right. But, you know, he pans down, he pans up, and we're going to keep going. We keep pushing through this scene, and it gives it that kinetic energy. It is like experiencing it on a stage, but then there's also a craftsman's hand, where that tap and trumpet that I was talking about from La La Land, it appears here, where at one point we're looking at the trumpet player in the sound booth, and then Chazelle taps his cameraman, or Chazelle might be the cameraman in this case, and we pan back to the theater kid with the ponytail, and he's doing his tap dance with a girl, and then we whip back to the trumpet. And it's one of those things where it works so well, because it's almost how your attention would be ping-ponging if you were in that room. And the most profound way to experience music is to be in the room. Like, have you ever had some guy bring out a guitar at a party and you're like, oh, don't do this, not the Wonderwall guy. But then he starts playing and you're like, oh no, I think I'm getting choked up. I have to leave the room so that people don't see me crying to this Dashboard Confessional cover. Or maybe that's just me. I don't know. I'm a reformed emo boy. What can I say? And so when I was watching Guy and Madeline, I was like, okay, I understand why he was able to make such a jump for Whiplash, and then why he was able to be so trusted for La La Land. And this brought me up to speed. And so the next thing on his plate was First Man. And First Man is the tale of Neil Armstrong and the moon landing. And I was excited for it. And so I did what any Chazelle head would do, and instead of going to the theaters to see it, I downloaded a Japanese bootleg of the movie. I don't know why I did this, and it was a colossally stupid decision to make. Because with every Chazelle movie, it's an experience that you want to see on the biggest screen possible, and I chose the Japanese bootleg. I think it was just because that First Man was not very successful at the box office. It sort of came and went. I turned on the, MKV file that I downloaded, which had yellow subtitles. And what I watched was like this dark, ugly looking horror movie type opening. And it reminded me of like when I used to try to merge on the parkway in my old Ford Focus, where the car would literally start like vibrating as I had to push it up to full speed to merge into traffic. But after that initial scene, by the time Gosling was grounded, I found all of the work so much more careful and filled with meaning. It was the sick child. It was the mother knowing she's not her husband's number one true love. It was a crisis in the sky, a crisis at home, the mechanical lowering of a coffin like a space capsule on a mission that's already been failed. It was a question of, Dad, want to come play? And the child receiving the response of, I have to help your mother. And it was that heavy moment when Gosling breaks down in his study. And maybe that's why all of this didn't captivate me as much as Chazelle's other work, because there are so many impressive moments in First Man, but with Gosling and Damien both involved here, it's impossible not to just say, all of these resources are available. Why are you choosing this to collaborate with when I know your combined powers are capable of such joy? And it's very easy to create this feeling that First Man creates, because so much of indie film is giving us this feeling, but it's so rare to create what Gosling does with his improvised but scripted type acting, and what Chazelle does with his kinetic but deeply planned out directing. You just want them to do what they do best, and it's selfish, but it's this selfishness that I think works for everyone. And First Man did not work for everyone. It served as a Jackie Brown stopgap in Damien Chazelle's career. The boy genius found himself with kind critic notices, but a film that failed to connect with audiences. And even worse, There were these oversensitive right-wing man babies who decided to pull the film into the culture wars due to the fact that Damien chose not to have the American flag shown during the moon landing. And if you aren't creating art in today's culture, just know that entering the culture war is a unique hell for any creative person. As an artist, you hate the people who are making an argument against an artistic choice that you made, but then you see who's defending you and you almost like are more disgusted by those people, where it's like, oh no, the blue-haired gender goblins with that nose piercing that looks like a horseshoe but seems to only exist to render a pretty person unfuckable. Like, these are the people who are defending me. Where you know, the nose ring, where I just call it the Florence because Florence Pugh is always like putting it in as like a direct assault on both straight men and gay men alike, where like the straight men are like, no, but you're so pretty. And the gay men are like, oh, girl, at least put sleeves on your dress and we'll let you wear that nose ring. And the hell that is the culture war can make cowards out of artists. There's a couple ways that you can handle being part of the culture war. You can react by apatowing yourself, where what you create becomes so devoid of any value to anyone since it's terrified of being something that it arrives and everyone just goes, okay. And then you're like left in this silence and you want to get some attention. So you hop on X and you start posting about Trump to prove how pure your soul is. And everyone looks at your tweets and they're like, wow, this is worse than the movie you just put out. And that's a pretty high bar. It's like removing any point of controversy and apologizing for who you once were is this dickless existence where both you and the world would be better off if you left the culture altogether. Choosing to apatow yourself is worse than artistic suicide because every post on X or every creative project that you release will arrive with the same type of humiliation that one might feel when they wake their laptop from sleep and the porn video you had been watching the night before blares out across an auditorium of all your peers. It's this humiliation of the past echoing into the present. And to Judd Apatow oneself is essentially artistic death. Then there's the option of becoming obsessed with your perceived shortfall, and you're like, well, the blue-haired gender goblins came to my defense, so why don't I make something for them? And so you convince yourself that the social issue film had stolen your trophy, and now you're going to trend chase and tell a story of a biracial tap dancer and force the audience to watch something that like 0.001% of filmgoers want, but they'll absolutely be terrified to speak ill of it. So it exists in this block of ice where everyone is like, please don't ask me about that film because my actual opinion regarding it might slip out and I really don't want people to know that. So just let's not discuss this at all. And it'll only exist as like a good Rotten Tomatoes score and nothing else. And then there's the option of the reset where you just do what you're told. An artist can swear off their instincts and just let a committee design their next project. It'll be diverse and happy and star-packed, and some aging Hollywood corpse can be shoehorned in so she can show up on the red carpet and give a Yas Queen soundbite about how powerful a taboo mental illness actually is, and anyone who questions that mental illness is actually mentally ill themselves. And then your cast will go on whatever dead magazine it is that makes poor actors do like a career retrospective, and you'll see that this actor used to be in actual movies with creative people, and all these movies will be paraded in front of them, and then they'll reach your movie, and the actor will just say whatever WME sent over because your work is just meaningless slop, and they don't have any actual like thoughts or feelings about it. They just have a party line that they've been told to say, and so they say it, and everyone will be like, wow, that person had a really great career, and they also starred in this new movie, but they won't go out and see the new movie. They'll just be like, I'm aware of this movie now. And I guess that's okay if you want conversation, but it's not okay if you want viewers. And so, with all these options, Damien Chazelle decided on a different path. Instead of denying everything that made the boy genius a boy genius, Damien leaned into his instincts, and he trusted his heart. They can stop calling you a boy genius, but they can't take away the boy's genius. Only he can snuff it out. I'm incredibly thankful for Chazelle's First Man because it was quiet and careful. It's a film that in part seemed to be made because people were like, can this guy fucking relax? How much Adderall can one boy ingest? It's a movie that stripped back bravura moments for incredibly technically sound filmmaking. Damien wanted to show that he could do more, and they gave him shit for it, and he decided to give them shit back. Streams of rancid, liquidy, elephant shit. This POV shit shower happens at minute 3 of Babylon's 189-minute runtime. The $80 million film continues on, filled with debauched sex and drugs and violence and racial language and self-harm, and there's also a plot line with a motivating narrative of, I need to fix this problem or they're gonna pour acid on my pussy. That was the boy genius's response. When they told the boy genius he was in a precarious position and needed to be careful, he responded, I need to make my movie. He didn't ask, are people going to like it? He just said, fuck 'em. When Babylon was announced, confirming that Damien's next film would be him finally taking on that mammoth script that we passed around like it was a Class A substance, those of us in the Boy Genius fan club congregated, and we were like, once the studio reads what they've signed on to make, they're gonna shit. We had the script, the May 2019 draft, and we couldn't wait to see how the Boy Genius would combine the period richness of First Man and the cinematic reverie of La La Land, and then utilize the pure drive on display in Whiplash, mixed with the music as your guide technique that Guy and Madeline had displayed. What we held on our laptop was Babylon, an original epic set in the Wild West early days of the film industry that was making a transition from silent films to talkies. It's a film of ambition and excess and hubris and hysteria and damaged identity, and most of all, it's a film about the unstoppable downhill boulder of change. I remember the first time I was swiping through the PDF, and being a failed screenwriter myself, I saw a bunch of the same tendencies that make my work unproducible. The way Babylon's script starts is pure studio repellent. It's the type of thing that assures your project receives the promo budget of the Eddie. But it's also the type of thing that an actor will read and be like, holy shit, this little dude is going for it. And that's appealing, when the other scripts that the actor gets is like, everyone's seen a Guy Ritchie movie before, but have they seen it on a train? I mean, maybe, yes, they've watched the movie on a train, but have they seen a movie that takes place on the train? Like The Glorious Darjeeling Limited? Have you ever heard of that before? And the actor has to be like, okay, Guy Ritchie on a train, I got it. Whatever, I'll show up there. I don't have to cut my hair, do I? The Boy Genius fan club traded the script like contraband, but maybe the writing was on the wall for this project, because at one point I was sending these breathless Instagram DMs to a girl about the script, only for her to pull a Nellie Leroy on me where she said she was going to take a shower, then never spoke to me again. And I think that's pretty impressive for a film to cause a walkout before even a single frame is filmed. I guess maybe the script hit her so hard, she was so inspired by the Clara Bow character that she saw herself as the 2022 Clara Bow and just followed the blueprint. She was like, this is me, for real. And then disappeared from my life, and I'm just Manny sitting in the car like, oh no. Wherever she is, I hope that she didn't get acid poured on her pussy. Oh my gosh. Buckle in, folks. We're a fourth of the way through. You thought Babylon's runtime was excessive? Wait till you figure out what this podcast goes to. I have 30,000 words we have to get through here. Oh man. I can't wait to start drinking again. Is it Easter yet? But anyways, reading through those first 30 pages of the script and ending with Manny taking Jack home, you started going from saying, okay, this is never going to get made, to there's actually a lot of good stuff in here. This has potential. I think they'll make this. What the Boy Genius was creating was not without precedent. In fact, it could be slotted into a long line of Hollywood movies about Hollywood movie making. And I don't just mean Singing in the Rain. For the best explainer of this tradition that Babylon builds on, go to Spotify and look up the Bret Easton Ellis podcast from April 12th, 2020. It's a podcast called The Movies About Movies. Since my entire shtick is ripping off Bret in all forms, to cover what he covers in that podcast would just be an inferior rehashing, so it's best that you listen to it straight from the king himself. But, once you realize that he does everything I do just much better, you can listen through for the free podcast that he has up and maybe join his Patreon, but could you come back here? Because, like I said, I got 30,000 words to get through, and it would be such a waste of time if you all Nellie Leroy me like that girl who disappeared in the shower and never was seen from again. To keep you interested, let's talk about Brad Pitt. It was announced in July of 2019 that he was signing on for the Boy Genius's new movie, and we were still riding high from seeing him give those fucking hippies what they deserved in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So a period piece set in LA with Brad Pitt giving an Oscar-level performance felt like, this cannot be bad. It's impossible. They would have to make this about a trans tap dancer overcoming all adversity to make this not work. It's perfect. And we had this desire to live in that universe again. And the fact that we would be able to go back to California was so exciting. And the idea that it would be different, it would be this different period of time that we're tracking, also had a thrill to it. Where there were neon signs in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, now there would be empty, dry land, a palm tree, and there's space waiting for creation to happen. Those slick paved roads would be dirt and the convertibles would still be there, but they'd be racing out of a Fitzgerald novel. When Emma Stone bowed out of the film and Margot Robbie replaced her in August of 2021, our Once Upon a Time in Hollywood paperbacks were creased from rereading, and this cast felt like a dream. Once everyone in the Boy Genius fan club abandoned me, tired of my constant updates, I found myself unable to convince anyone to see Babylon with me, so I bought a single ticket at the South Orange Bowtie Cinema, then walked inside the theater. It was an empty theater. If you've read my novel Neon Blacktop, you know I had this bizarre childhood fear that anytime my parents took me to see a movie, I was certain that we were in the wrong theater and I was about to see something horrific. Beauty and the Beast was not going to play. It was going to be Freddy Krueger. I was sure of it. And the trailers that happened beforehand were just different movies, and I was like, I didn't sign up to see this movie. No one warned me that we were going to see this movie, even though it was just a trailer. And so I would just run into the bathroom and hide there. So if you want to read about how pathetic I was, check out Neon Blacktop. But this time, when I was sitting down in Boy Genius's film, I was like, I've been turned off by the first 10 minutes of all his movies, so there was no fear there. I could sit down and be like, none of this is working for 10 minutes, and I'd be totally fine. It's how those movies came to me, and I ended up loving them, one after another. So there was no fear. It couldn't be worse than La La Land that starts with a racially ambiguous woman, a guy with a mustache, another racially ambiguous guy, another racially ambiguous guy, and an Asian guy all suddenly break into song while stopped in traffic. It's this Old Navy commercial that would play in the waiting room of hell. I have no idea how long that opening number is, but if I had to guess, I would say it's over 19 minutes because it just keeps going. It's this prison of melting pot joy, and it takes place in one of the worst places I've ever been in my entire life, the freeway in LA. When the music finally stops and the horns return, I found myself so thankful for the peace of gridlock traffic filled with people who hate each other that I was like, all right, now I can settle into this. And there were two superstars in the form of Emma and Ryan appeared, and for the rest of the film I found myself on a bravura journey that emotionally details the struggle of choosing life as an artist. I guess there was a minor improvement in the opening scene of First Man, despite it following the same convention, minus feeling like it was trying to sell me 15 graphic tees. But like I said, that could be a problem on my side because of that Japanese MKV file. And the film started and we're in that tiny capsule with minimal lighting and 2 green screens and everything's rattling and noises and cutaways to the mechanical spaceship stuff. And I was just staring at my TV and I was like, this kind of looks like shit, but at least there wasn't that much dialogue, so the Japanese subtitles didn't take up too much room. And in the end, the entire sequence felt like the first kill of a horror movie where I was like, just get this over with so I can see an actual story. This time, I knew what to expect with the opening scene. When Margot showed up thanking me for seeing a movie in theaters, I turned around and I saw only like 3 other people in the theater, and somehow again, I was disappointed by the start of the movie. The theater had become awake. The South Orange SoPac only had 2 showings of Babylon that day, and I was at the late showing, the 4:30 p.m., that everyone should have been able to attend because this was New Year's Day. I was watching a movie that had just arrived in theaters and was already leaving. Regardless, I knew what I was about to watch would be the cashing of a blank check. It's 150 speaking parts, it's 7,000 costumes, it's complete orchestras, it's the most admired leading man in Hollywood and the hottest leading woman in film, all together for 3 hours. I knew that if it followed the movie script, what I was attending wasn't a funeral at all. In fact, it would be like more of a resurrection. There's this Francois Truffaut quote that says, "I demand that a film express either the joy of making cinema or the agony of making cinema. I'm not interested in anything in between." I knew that Babylon wasn't in between those things, it was both those things. And so I reclined back and watched as the sepia Paramount logo appeared, and then, immediately, I noticed a change from the script. We're told that we're in Bel Air in 1926. In the script, we're in Encino. A box truck pulls into frame and an Action Bronson-looking fat guy steps out of it. There's a confusion about what the truck is supposed to hold. The Action Bronson guy thinks he's hauling a horse, but he's quickly informed that he's hauling an elephant. The man who breaks this news to him is Manny, played by Diego Calva. He's our good-looking Hispanic protagonist. Damien had the pandemic to work with Diego, even utilizing him as a PA on a commercial shoot, just so that Diego would be familiar with every aspect and employee of Damien's crew. There was a lot of care put into this relationship, and with good reason. Diego is the audience surrogate. He is us. Getting the bad news from Manny, the Action Bronson guy looks and acts probably how the studio execs did when Damien said that he wouldn't cut this opening scene. He freaks out. But then there's a negotiation, and since this is Hollywood, the disagreement is resolved with money and the promise of debauched pleasure in the future. We quickly realize that the Action Bronson-looking dude is right. His truck isn't fit to haul an elephant, so Manny has to help by towing it with his own car. Our destination is at the top of the hill, and we simply are not getting up there. Ultimately, we're headed in the wrong direction, slipping backwards. Manny and a farmhand try to keep the truck from sliding down the hill, but in doing so, they find themselves at the wrong end of that elephant. The moment we've been waiting for happens. A diarrhea rain sprays down on the farmhand and us, the audience. The discussion of the boy genius becoming just another director is easily shaken off because despite First Man flopping and the Eddie existing like an urban legend, they gave him the biggest stars and the largest canvas, and they even sprung for the most incontinent elephant to ever exist. He fucking did it. The boy genius is shitting on the executives who arrived to screen this film that was made with a blank check that Damien kept adding zeros to during COVID. At this point, the near-empty theater stopped mattering to me, and the adrenaline of realizing that this work isn't a 4-quadrant, over-edited, hand-wrung diversity ploy. This is a film made by an auteur. After another promise that pushes us forward, same as the first, Manny gets the elephant to Don Wallach's party, and we're invited inside. Finally, the needle drops on the Victrola and Justin Hurwitz joins us as we drift through a mansion, while we still have the stench of shit in our nose. We pan out, beyond a beautiful woman we're watching dance, to see that she's walking over to a fat, nude man who's lying on his back. The beautiful woman stands with one foot on either side of this faux fatty arbuckle, and just as the elephant rained down diarrhea, the woman pisses on the fat man's belly, then his face. This really happens. By the time Manny catches up with us, he's now in a suit, and the fat man is in his robe, holding out an empty bottle of champagne, making a request for more. Leaving the room, then walking to the railing, we look down at studio head Don Wallach's party, and that request for more is answered completely. There's a sea of bodies, one part Brazilian carnival, one part Eyes Wide Shut, with a dash of Moulin Rouge tossed in as a tribute to the kinetic chaos master himself, Baz Luhrmann. We don't have to push our way through this party. We drift on a line toward a band, specifically to a black trumpet player. This is Sidney Palmer, played by Jovan Adepo. We focus on him a little too long, especially with all the chaos going on around him, and this is a clue that he's more than just a part of the band. He dodges a chair that's thrown at him or thrown near him, and we finally turn away. The movie doesn't really establish his identity with any consistency, sidelining him for massive chunks of the picture, but we'll get back to him later. Right now, we have to push through the party with our Mexican Nick Carraway. Manny is stopped by a well-dressed elderly woman who's Jean Smart, playing Eleanor St. John. We get her name because Manny is warned not to speak with her. Manny is the type of low-level gopher that is easy pickings for a seasoned gossip columnist. And that's what Eleanor St. John is. She's a journalist, gossip columnist, fixer, empress dowager, and socialite. If I had to guess, she's modeled after Eleanor Glynn in Hedda Hopper. With a live chicken in hand, we walk with Diego, cutting and weaving through the party, then stepping outside where we can finally breathe again. The cool blue hue of the castle-like mansion we're standing outside of is calming compared to the yellows, urine and otherwise, that bathe the party. We sit with our protagonist as he lights up a cigarette, then looks back towards the party, almost wistfully. Whatever he's thinking, we'll never know, because crashing into frame, into Manny's life, into the boy genius's film, here is the prettiest girl in Hollywood, Margot Robbie as Nellie Leroy. This is the type of entrance, crashing a car into a statue, that should be a red flag. And when Nellie gets out of her car, we see that she's literally wearing a red flag of a dress, so the symbolism could not be heavier. Nellie crashes into everything, and it's Manny's job to clean it all up. As Nellie begins to make her case to security as why she should get into the party, we see hints of, I don't know, whatever the fuck Margot's name was in Wolf of Wall Street, as well as a little Harley Quinn. I'm told that she's doing a Jersey accent in this movie, but since I live in New Jersey, it's just called speaking here. Security stops Nellie from getting into the party, saying that she's not on the list, but honestly, this is just for exposition. I mean, if someone who looks like Margot Robbie shows up to a party in Bel Air, they aren't getting turned away. They're being, thrown into the party. They're being abducted into the party. They're putting, a bag over her head and taking her to a basement immediately, based on, everything that we know about Hollywood now. Margot may never leave this mansion again, but Nellie Leroy, she needs some help, and she is a girl in peril, and Manny cannot resist a girl in peril. The boy genius knows all of this. He's not trying to hide this fact, because once Nellie does get into the party, she immediately is able to ascend and transcend. It doesn't matter that she's from a state that some, certainly not me, would consider low class and full of crime. We can't say who's doing the crime, but it's not Margot. I mean, although Margot is from Australia, the New Jersey of continent, so the crime will come. She's going to be doing crime. You can be sure of that, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. The way Nellie gets into the party is that Manny notices that she's the hottest girl ever, so he uses the tiny amount of power that he has to pull the only string he holds, and this immediately bonds him with Nellie. In a weird prediction of the future, within moments of meeting each other, Nellie tells Manny, "You don't become a star. Either you are one or you ain't." The camera hangs on Diego Calva's Manny, and a funny thing happens. The audience, or at least me, already knew that this fresh face wasn't a star. The movie could have doubled its box office receipts, and Diego still wouldn't be getting better jobs than whatever obscurity he's currently toiling in. I mean, in 2 words, he ain't. Our outsiders continue walking outside, taking the long way around the castle. Then they walk into the party, together, looking for drugs, in American pastime. We return to Sydney, our trumpet player, as a midget pogos on a prop penis, and we finally hear Jovan Adepo speak. But before the scene can establish any rhythm, the midget's penis comes on the crowd, then we're back in the fat man's room where Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers throws open the door to find the girl who introduced us to the party, now OD'd, on the floor. She's peed her last piss, and now she's covered in the tears of a fat man. But as far as fat man bodily fluids go, tears are on the better side, let's be honest here. We know that it's going to be Manny's job to clean things up, but right now, he's busy with Nellie in the drug room. Yes, there's just a whole room filled with drugs that apparently, the gopher has access to, where, I don't know, it seems like maybe like one of Manny's responsibilities is like, all right, well, you need to make sure the heroin gets there on time. So that's how he got a key into it. But they're just like in there sniffing, going buck wild. And I mean, the pay might be bad, but there are benefits to this job, let's just say. We return back outside the party, and here he is. Brad Pitt is Jack Conrad, a romantic leading man pulling from John Gilbert and Douglas Fairbanks. There's a Singing in the Rain character counterpart in Don Lockwood. Jack Conrad is one of the first of his kind, so his downfall doesn't have 1,000 precedents that it now does. That's why the shock is so severe about what happens to Jack. We saddle up to the car, and Brad is speaking Italian again. It's his second best Italian performance after Inglourious Bastards. Next to him is Olivia Wilde, and she's just bitching at him. She's shot so darkly that no one would believe Olivia is in the movie. If she was like, hey, I was in Babylon, they would be like, oh, okay. Is this another Shia situation? Yeah, I believe that. But no, it is Olivia Wilde. She kicks him out of the car and then drives away, and we never see her again. There's no hard feelings, though, because we're with Jack Conrad, and he is a star. He enters the party with his shades on. He kisses Eleanor's hand. He kisses a black chick. He schedules a premiere. Then he takes a table and immediately gets bottle service and tits in his face. Once his bottle is on ice, Jack spends another 30 seconds ordering more booze. There's no one else at the table. Jack is getting a divorce, and he's about to tie one on. The party is swelling around the table, but Brad commands this scene so completely that it seems like there are only 2 people in the room, the waitress and Jack. You can't become a star. You either are one or you ain't. And hot damn, is Brad Pitt the shiniest of stars. Even with his Gomez Addams mustache, he's this rare kind of beautiful. Poor Jack can't even settle in with his first bottle as he waits for the rest of the liquor cabinet to arrive because he's pulled away. Jack's friend George is pulled up next to Nellie's broken statue, and he needs help. Jack heads outside, and we see what I hope is Lucas hot in a fat suit. I know that Lucas is, let's just say, special friends with Leo, and Leo appears to just order bacon like Jack orders booze, but Lucas being this fat is like a genuine twink death, and I hope is just movie magic. I guess he has to be fat. Lucas plays George, a sad sack with woman troubles. Jack gives him a speech declaring, "You're not going to kill yourself over it," then promises him a girl if he just goes into the party. And so we return inside. The music of the party returns, and we're back in the drug room with Manny and Nellie. They're doing that Scarface amount of coke. Manny takes off his jacket and discusses his dreams to be on a movie set. He wants to be part of something bigger and important that lasts and means something. Margot's Nellie Leroy hypes him up about this, excited that she's found someone else who dreams like she does. Since we've reached a coked-up portion of the film, there's this metaphorical brake pumping that runs throughout this movie, and she's introduced downstairs. She's the rose petal of the rising sun, Miss Lady Fei Zhu, played by Lee Jun Lee, an actress, singer, and title card writer. She's dressed like a dyke and she's smoking a cigarette and singing about pussy, but before you get too excited, don't be. This character is absolutely meaningless. She doesn't advance the story, she doesn't have an iconic moment, she doesn't do a believable job of being a love interest, and every time she shows up, the movie's length becomes so apparent. This lady is probably a diversity demand. I mean, when did those shitty Oscar DEI rules come into play? Because Lady Faye is that. She's like a requirement. She's in the original script, but hot damn, if there was something that could be edited out of this movie and we would lose nothing, it's this meaningless character. The entire pace of the movie grinds to a halt as Lady Faye walks through the party and she kisses a girl, and it's totally silent despite the fact that everything was debauched like 40 seconds earlier, and like, how the fuck is this party this silent? But I think at some point she kisses Kia Gerber, where it's like, all right, yeah, no, this is the best fucking movie ever. Like, just a woman kissing Kia Gerber. Maybe her character is actually the most important character in this whole movie, because, I mean, that rules. I think I blacked out after that kiss, but when I came to, I was watching Jack approach Lady Faye after the pace fucking she committed, and Jack is like, go talk to George. If Lucas Haas really does weigh this much, I have to imagine that Leo does this type of thing with a lot of Victoria's Secret models. But then again, I mean, the last time I saw a Victoria's Secret model, she probably weighed as much as George, because now they're hiring a Lady Faye Zhu type of, this goes against everything our brand stands for type of casting. So maybe now Leo is like, George, I'm going to need you to fall on this grenade for me so I can go talk to Victoria. But with Brad back, we feel okay about the Lady Faye and her mission, and we're back to our Hurwitz banger, and the Coke couple is now on the dance floor. Margot moves like the seductress and star that she is, while Diego stands there like the blank slate that he is. Nellie is this desperate artist who lacks a canvas, and so she starts painting the town red, her dress flapping behind her. And I must comment, as a man with a unique interest in women's armpits, let me tell you, this Margot Robbie performance is one for the ages. And all right, like, fuck you, don't judge me. You're listening to a podcast about a movie that has a script line that, and I quote, "The elephant starts shitting. It's overwhelming, huge, alien, and gross. Steam rises." So, like, get off my back about my armpit thing if you're listening to Elephant Diarrhea Radio Hour here. Anyways, back to the girl who peed on Fatty Arbuckle. Flea finds Manny, and they return to the fat man's room where they stand over this possibly dead hooker/actress, and they try to figure out how to get her out of the party. They really overcomplicate this matter, because I was in a frat. Do you know how many times I watched two girls carry an unconscious girl out of a party? Happens more often than not. You just ask for a hoodie and put it on her, and then you weekend at Bernie's that bitch out the front door. We're at a party here where at least a third of the guests have their tits out, so I don't think a woman who looks drunk beyond measure is going to really inspire much concern. But, they have to figure something out, and Manny suggests that they create a diversion with the elephant. And, it's like, all right, amazing dumbass idea, Manny. There's a guy in the foyer getting a champagne bottle shoved in his ass. I don't think an elephant is really going to move the needle here, but let's try it out. And after this, the dead hooker is revealed to be an actress who has to shoot a bar scene tomorrow, which means they're out an actress, and Flea's job is to make sure the actress gets the set, so he's freaking out about this, where, I mean, in Hollywood, this has to be relatively common. Like, even now, John Boyega just goes missing from a shoot for, like, multiple weeks, and Hollywood is like, all right, just send the next guy in who kind of looks like John Boyega, where it's an easy problem to solve, so I don't know why Flea is freaking out, but maybe it's just because everyone is on coke at this party, so everything is like, my heart is going to explode because of what's going on at this very moment, so I need more coke or a solution or I'm going to die. And so they go about doing it, and they get this actress out, and The party wraps up after this, where it's finally coming to an end, and we see Eleanor St. John writing notes about everything that happened, and Lady Faye's over there being a good girl and dancing with George, and Jack is drunk off his ass, and Manny is in the wings talking with Flea about possibly getting a job on set because he did so well with the elephant today. "You're where you belong," Flea tells him, then sends him back toward Nellie, who actually got the part that was supposed to be the dead hookers, so we do have a fun little moment where it happened for Nellie. She did it. She rushes out of the party into the breaking dawn, and she dances only for Manny, all alone, as she celebrates the fact that she got her foot in the door by kicking it in, then dancing through the party in such a way that she went from crashing the party to controlling the tempo as much as Sidney did when he was on stage playing that trumpet. This display is impossibly magnetic, and Manny can't stop himself from approaching Nellie and telling her that he's in love with her. But the dumbass does it in Spanish, where it's like, the last time we saw a guy discussing something with his significant other in a foreign language, she kicked him out of the car and then drove away, never to be seen from again. So you really kind of fucked this one up, Manny. You should have just said it in English. I mean, didn't he see what happened with Olivia Wilde? But I guess it was shot so darkly that maybe he didn't, you know? We barely did. Manny's night becomes day after this, and he can't go anywhere with Nellie because he's given the task of getting drunk-ass Jack Conrad home safe. They drive to Jack's mansion, and once they're at his house, Jack gets his second wind. He strips down, stares at the hills, wax poetic about film, then falls off his balcony, as one does. We've all been there, right? In the most Gatsby-ass illusion of all time, Manny, our Nick Carraway, rushes down to find Jack, our Gadsby, floating face down in the pool. We're only a half hour into the movie, so we know that Jack isn't dead, and he pops up out of the water and then rushes back inside to go get a couple hours of sleep. Things have just begun. The title card drops. Now. At this moment. How far are we into this podcast at this point? And this is when the Babylon title card drops. You think I have a problem getting to the point? Welcome to the Boy Geniuses world. But there's more to come. Wake up. It's the day after the party. Nellie regains consciousness in her piece of shit apartment, but I'm from New Jersey like her, so I don't judge her for this apartment. I'm just like, hey, nice digs. Lady Faye wakes up in her apartment that's attached to her parents' laundry service. The trumpet player returns to his boarding house, slides off his suspenders, then makes a bed out of 2 chairs. Manny's bed is in a chair as well, and Jack wakes him up with a slap to the chest, then bounds out into the sunlight. I don't judge any of these artists for their living situation because I live in a tenement apartment in New Jersey, so I now just feel like more of an artist because all these other creative people are living an identical life. We're all misfits in a shitty apartment. This is what being an artist is. It's LA. First thing in the morning, we're blasted by the warm Cali sun, and it's like no place on earth. Well, I mean, maybe it's like Australia, but we'd have to ask Margot about that because who the fuck is taking that flight? I mean, come on. Since Nellie Leroy achieved her dream after a single night of peacocking, she can't sleep off her hangover, and by 8 a.m. she's arrived on set. Instead of the set being a backlot where a movie's being filmed, it's more of a carnival where movies are being filmed. Instead of rides at this fair, there are various 3-wall backdrops where dozens of movies are being filmed simultaneously. How is this possible? Because we don't have sound in our movies yet. The set is on cheap, inhospitable land, yet, in some places, it's been turned into a jungle. This is what we do. Where there is nothing, Americans see fantastical possibilities. It's a damn near miracle that Central Park still exists. Margot watches all of this, eyes clear considering the night she had, and she's unsure where to go. A man with a cape approaches her and offers her a bag of peanuts. She's told her first bag is free. She takes them and cracks one open. There's a pill inside. This whole character of the Count, the guy who gave her the pill, doesn't really work at all. He's like, I guess maybe a metaphor for what goes on in Hollywood? I don't know. It's this dumbass character, and like, after he gives the bag to Margot, he gives one to a child. Like, yeah, we get it. Could you be more heavy-handed? Like, he has the heaviest hands of all time that are handing out peanuts. But now that Margot has her drugs, she's ready to be in Hollywood, and she's introduced to her director, Ruth Adler, who, perhaps surprisingly, is a woman. It turns out that this is the boy genius's girl, and he obviously didn't want her showing her tits, so he was like, all right, well, the only woman part in this movie where she doesn't show her tits is the director, and so that's what you have to be. It makes sense, though. He made her a genius director, just like him. It was a self-insert into who Damien inserts himself into. This director wrote a way for the world to see his wife the way he does, and it's kind of sweet. You may remember this actress, Olivia Hamilton, as the gluten-free girl from Mia's coffee shop job in La La Land. And let me just say, she is a great actress. You know, like, if she auditioned for this part, even as someone unrelated to the people making the movie, there's no way that I would order lunch in the middle of her audition. She forms her character really fully, and, you know, even though she doesn't continue out through the entire movie, the scenes that she's in are really powerful, and every scene she's in actually works, which is more than I can say for some other characters. Setting up the type of set that Ruth runs, she turns to her first AD. This is a guy that I've only seen in The Wolf of Wall Street, and he declares that there are no tits, so they're going with Nellie. I, for one, want to say for the record that Margot does have very nice tits. I think that that's a fact. I'm progressive like that. And to think all of you call me a misogynist. Totally uncalled for. Anyway, suddenly without warning, we're up on a ridge where Spike Jonze with a shaved head and a German accent is pissed about, I don't know, something. Jack pulls up with Manny in a powder blue convertible, and he's immediately briefed on the problems going on set. George tells Jack that the extras are striking to negotiate their pay. Manny is put in charge of negotiating this strike, which makes sense considering the fucking nanny negotiated the last Hollywood strike in the past year, so it's consistent if nothing else. Manny gets on a horse and starts shooting a gun and tells the extras to get the fuck back to work, which is something I miss about old school negotiations. We need more threatening Hollywood people with guns and less getting lectured by them about guns. Damien really has some fun with his blank check here, as his extras are everywhere for a sweeping 900-person battlefield scene. From a ridge, we see the old lady gossip columnist, Eleanor St. John, and she's writing a piece for whatever the version of Variety is that they had at the time. She's being as pretentious as I am in writing this essay, but at least she's doing it for a respectable enough publication, and she won't have to narrate what she wrote for the most loathsome form of communication a white man can engage in, the dreaded podcast. We get a lunch title card and they break to figure out what to do with a dead extra. Manny doesn't have an elephant this time, so there's no distraction to get the extra out of the desert, and a solution is never really presented. It just cuts to 2:55 p.m. when Elle Fanning's ex-boyfriend shows up on set. I don't know what his actor name is. I resent him because he's dating my girl, or he was dating my girlfriend. He might have broke my girlfriend's heart, which is unacceptable. And, like, Damien doesn't even put enough effort in him either. Like, he literally is just playing Irvin Thalberg. Like, everyone else got fake names after the script went into production, but Damien was just like, I don't know, just give fucking Elle Fanning's ex-boyfriend Irvin Thalberg as a name. I don't want to spend the extra time thinking up something different for him. I mean, you don't really see this guy in many movies, so one has to assume that Elle Fanning might have been discussed for Nellie, and while she was meeting with Damien, she was like, I'm not going to do this movie, but could you give my fucking boyfriend some work? He's driving me crazy and I need him distracted. Anyways, Elle Fanning's boyfriend shows up and he walks into a tent where Jack Conrad is wearing chainmail and a nose that would be offensive if it didn't look so much like my nose. No one can allege that it's a Jewish nose and try to, like, maestro Damien Chazelle for this, because I have that nose, and like I said, we're in the home stretch of Lent. Easter is tomorrow, so I think the nose is perfectly fine. It's mid-afternoon, and Jack is on the phone wheeling and dealing. He almost catches a spear to the back of the head, but he just keeps going, and this is all a single take, and Brad is the definition of professionalism in this scene, given the chaos that's going on around him, and, you know, it's just super professional. Well, for now. We'll come back to the tent a little later. On the opposite side, where being professional is not in the cards, German Spike Jonze stands over a shattered camera, and he does what his character does in every frame of the movie he's in and acts like a total fucking psychopath. Elle Fanning's ex-boyfriend and George show up along with Manny, and like the gopher Manny is, he gets sent to find a replacement camera. Elsewhere on set, Nellie is finally getting her big break. The music from the party returns and Nellie turns it on. Just like at the party, she vamps it up, and all the extras, who are like old bearded men, needless to say, they love it. And Ruth is like, okay, this could work, and we're off to the races. Manny is speeding to get the camera before they lose light. Jack is either rewriting the script for the movie that they're currently filming or his next movie. Nellie is on the bar flashing her tits, which, if I didn't make clear before, are the perfect size. Everything is turned up to 10, with Margot nitpicking and a boozy Jack declaring, "Frankly, Scarlett, you're a cunt," and Manny almost getting in a head-on collision. The music relents as Manny gets to the camera store, and the lack of information regarding what exact camera he's looking for throws a wrench into things. Not that it matters too much, though, because there aren't any cameras available for loan anyways. Manny will have to wait for one. This is the classic dramatic intention and obstacle, so for once the audience feels something for the bland Diego Calva. We want him to get this camera so he can satisfy the German, no Nazi. Until the camera shows, the shooting has to pause on Spike's set, but Ruth is still working and Margot is working it, and honestly, it's kind of like a plot hole for the fact that they're shooting like 50 different movies on this set and Spike Jonze couldn't just wait for one of them to wrap and use their camera, but whatever, the boy genius knows adrenalized cinema and that's what he's giving us. On Nellie and Ruth's set, in a Barbie premonition, Samara Weaving shows up, but I mean, actually, in Barbie, was that Emma Thackeray or Macquarie or something like that? I mean, man, if I was Samara Weaving and I didn't get cast in Barbie, I would behead my agent. The arrival of Samara is an example of how quickly the star who's calling the shots can find the camera focusing on a girl who's just happy to be there. It's a warning. Your time has a limit to it, and there are new girls showing up every day. Despite how different each set is in the desert, the trauma bond of creating art can be seen throughout it. Jack is spinning so many plates that he needs to knock back drinks so that the enormity of the multiple moments he's balancing don't knock him over. Spike Jonze is wrangling monkeys with his extras. Ruth has lost her actress and gained her actress, and her other actress is pissed now. George is waiting on that camera, and when Manny arrives in an ambulance, they're bonded together by this moment where they were hemorrhaging light and cash, and Boss Man was definitely going to be pissed, so they had to get this done. It all comes together. Ruth makes her day. Nellie makes her dream come true. Spike gets to film his scene. And Jack, well, Jack is now so drunk he can barely stand. They need to get him to his mark and fast. It's golden hour, and there's this beautiful shot of Jack and the crew climbing up the hill in the setting sun, and it perfectly displays how Sisyphusian movie making really is. And yet, the show must go on, and it does. Jack composes himself, the symphony soars, the magic happens, and suddenly, what was once a job is now art. As the film runs through the camera, only the beauty of this perfect moment is in frame. Everything else falls away. Everything else is forgotten. And cut. Here comes applause. They pop champagne. It's time to party. Lives have been changed. Eleanor is intrigued by Nellie, and she interviews Jeff Garland's Harvey Weinstein-esque Don Wallach about his new star. When she looks for Nellie, she finds her, jerking off an ice sculpture, as the trumpet player plays on. Now that everything is shot, it's a matter of Lady Faye putting her dialogue cards in, and Ruth assembling the footage. As the picture comes together, I seem to remember that a hint of the La La Land score could be heard. Movie magic. The stress of the work is then traded for the stress of showing the work to the world. It's hard enough to make any movie. Making a good one is near impossible. Part of the reason it's so difficult is that only the audience can decide what a good movie is. Sure, the critics can, but you fill your movie with enough Lady Fays and the critics will praise it as a groundbreaking masterwork, and you still can't be sure if you made a good movie or if you were just being a good little boy for the current culture. The thing about being a star is that until people experience you, they don't believe you have the goods. Nellie has to do that convincing to get into her own premiere because she's a star, but they don't know it until they get into her premiere. As soon as the audience sees her perform, she'll never have to schmooze her way into another function. She does get inside, and we get to see Nellie experience herself on film for the first time. It's a lovely little scene that harkens back to another Brad Pitt and Margot Robbie film about the magic of making movies, where Sharon Tate watches herself one afternoon in the theater, feet up on a seat, and her pratfall gets this huge laugh, and Sharon's beaming smile lights up every audience member's heart. It's a happy ending Sharon never got to have. Once again, Margot gets to look around the theater and laugh at the audience's reaction to the pleasure that they get from her. In a Star 80 type situation, outside of the theater, Eric Roberts shows up, playing Nellie's dad, and it made me wonder if a different Emma had also auditioned for Nellie. Did Elle get her ex-boyfriend a job, and then Emma Roberts got her father a job, and they both turned down Damien for the role of Nellie? It doesn't matter. Margot is the perfect Nellie. And now, with Nellie as a contract girl, it's time for her to do it all over again. Ruth is back with Nellie and Samara Weaving, whose character's name is Constance. And now that Constance has seen how the audience reacts to Nellie, a feud is brewing. Constance is being overtaken, and she knows it. She screams at the director about Nellie. This must have been cathartic for Samara, because she never has a tan since she's always in Margot Robbie's shadow. All of Babylon is about the wobbly legs of sea change. This specific change, in this scene, is one of the most common a star can encounter. The girl with the ice nipples who's willing to work for peanuts, sometimes filled with pills, shows up on set, and she does the job she's asked, puts asses in seats, and suddenly the studio's spotlight shifts. Now it's a matter of building architecture around Nellie's rising star. Eleanor writes cover stories, the face doctor tweaks perfection, the rumor mill informs everyone with their tongue out that Nellie fucks like a dream. This is how it is, but not how it always will be. While standing at the urinal, Jack is told of screenings they're having for talkies, pictures with sound, and he asks if people really want sound in their movies, then, once again, diarrhea sprays to start another act. Jack doesn't shit his pants about this new invention, though. Instead of fearing the future, Jack welcomes sound. He has the ability to roll with the punches, telling George and Manny it's what they've been waiting for. The changes keep coming. Jack onto his next wife, Olga, and then with a gunshot, we're in New York. The Cali sun is replaced by New York's blue rain as Manny leaves the theater and he's reunited with Nellie. This time, instead of sneaking Nellie into a theater, he has to sneak her out of a theater. The crowd is everywhere around them. Horowitz's beautiful Nellie and Manny theme plays as Nellie's gambling problem is tossed off without weight during her maniacal dialogue, and in one of the biggest laughs of the movie, Nellie responds, "Jack Conrad, I would fuck him." I didn't do the line delivery justice there because Margot is like a true artist when it comes to this, where you just... if there weren't rights issues, I would splice her line reading in because it literally had me rolling. It was so perfect. And so now, Nellie has the life of a star. She might be able to fuck Jack Conrad. Things are going that well, but she's still Nellie Leroy. And instead of heading back to an expensive hotel, the car stops outside of a sanatorium. With Manny by her side, Nellie arrives to reveal a secret. They walk inside the sanatorium, and they face Nellie's mother, hair bedraggled, eyes sunken, medicated to the gills, with nothing to say. The scene is done so much more powerfully in Andrew Dominik's Blonde, where... Actually, I'm not going to read this. You know what? This will be the next podcast essay I do, so just put Andrew Dominik's Blonde in your Netflix queue. And watch it. It's beautiful, amazing, deep piece of art, and I have a lot to say about it. I hope you'll come back and listen after you watch. We leave the Thackeray Sanitarium, and back in the car, Nellie reveals the one thing she normally doesn't reveal to anyone: her heart. As she expresses the hurt of being passed over even when she was a star, it shows that there's still a chip on her shoulder. Fame hasn't fixed anything, and eventually, after her monologue, she falls silent, like her mother. Manny opens up as well. He reveals it's easier for him to be on his own, and Nellie says she's always been on her own, despite the fact that her dad follows her everywhere. The couple's theme plays. The car stops. Nellie gives Manny a kiss and a promise. I'll see you back in L.A. At Warner's Theater, Manny takes a seat in a packed house, and his eyes don't even need to rise to the screen because the singing is blaring from new speakers all around him. And then, the standing ovation begins. It's clear that musicals are a perfect way to show audiences why they need sound in their pictures. This is the future. Hollywood needs to be ahead of the curve, so Manny doesn't wait for the showing to be over. He rushes out into the night, into a phone booth, and calls Jack, telling him that everything is about to change. And it does. 1928 arrives, and the studio set we're used to seeing is now here. It's the wide-open warehouse in the three-cornered room and the new demand of, quiet please. The Carney mayhem is gone. The entire space is for one movie shot under buzzing lights. Nellie and the boy genius's wife are reunited for another picture. They've done this before, and they'll do it again. This is easy. California is known for earthquakes, so just hold on. You'll survive. Most of the time. You know how they say the best way to learn is by doing? Well, as the crew starts filming this new type of picture, they're going to learn very quickly how wrong things can go. It starts with the shoes. Now there's a mandate of rubber soles only. Instead of Lady Faye stringing together the scenes after the fact, the dialogue is now decided beforehand, and Nellie is having a hell of a time remembering it. She flips through the pages, nervous. It's all quiet on set, and then, action. Take one. The line reading doesn't work. There's a camera box. The guy inside lets everyone know that it's hot as hell in there. The crew is like, awesome. Get the fuck back in the box. We'll go again. Take two. Nellie misses her mark, so she's not under the mic and the audio will be fucked up. The importance of hitting a mark is relayed. Nellie's greatest strength, being loose and carefree, now becomes a concern. Take three. Nellie is too quiet. They could probably handle that in ADR, but maybe ADR isn't even invented yet. Who knows? Probably only the boy genius, so we'll go with his instincts on this one. Take four. Nellie is modulating her pitch too much, and there's an intrusion. Before take five happens, there's another intrusion, and the fake Harvey Weinstein shows up to check up on things. Damien Chazelle, your trauma's showing. Take five. Nellie gets her line off perfectly, then heads to her next mark and answers the phone on her desk. They have to cut. The sound guy hears a squeak. The audio is no good. The picture side is better, but the guy in the camera box wants to break because he's sweating his balls off. Checking in on our actress, she's also spun out, calling the count for drugs. Eventually, they figure out the sound is coming from the pin in the director's ankle. Don't move, Ruth. Take six. A grip sneezes, then immediately gets dressed down in an anti-Semitic tirade that would make even Ye blush. This is brave to get into a movie, but it's also what happens behind the scenes. On set, men will behave like children, then when they're in public, the same Hollywood pariahs will lecture you about acceptable language. Behind the scenes, you'll be told the dirtiest joke you've ever heard. Then when it's time to make jokes in public, that fat, squinty-eyed cuck Jimmy Kimmel will read Trump tweets to extend an already too long Oscars ceremony, just so he can jerk off in his own mouth in front of a dwindling audience of disinterested people. These moral grandstanders are so used to creating Hollywood-approved performances for the public that they don't understand that we hate them doing this. And even if they're revealing their potentially ugly souls, it's better than what they're revealing by their, oh, I'm so perfect and above all this other stuff type of shit. At least showing the truth would give us some sense of sincerity instead of the deeply hateable superiority these fucks drip with. And when I went on that digression about how the next Purge movie should be about the one night a year where Americans can kill every late-night host with no repercussions, another 10 takes had happened. So now, we're at take 17, and Nellie misses her mark. Again, another arrival. Flea shows up as Nellie begins to fight the sound guy. Nellie declares, unfucking professional, in a way where it's like, Oh, this is Margot showing her Amsterdam trauma of having to film the Babylon dry run, and they're referencing Bale's, "Oh, good for you," freak out. Nice. Let's see Damien Chazelle's Amsterdam. Well, the show must go on, and Nellie is high and crying and sweaty, but she pulls it together because what is acting if not a sanctioned break from one's brain? While none of the characters show concern when Nellie delivers, "I'm from Granville, Ohio, so I know quiet," in her Jersey accent, the audience can sense trouble on the horizon. If someone from Granville, Ohio heard Nellie speak like that, they'd probably think she's talking in a foreign language. Nellie doesn't even notice the shark swimming in the water around her. She ends the scene with, "Nice fella, wonder if he's single," in the way that sex always hangs off Nellie, and this will become a problem for her as well. But right now the problem is sound, and the scene is over, yet it's totally silent. We look around. The sound guy is giving the thumbs up. This comes with a rain of applause. This is the first good take. The first good take is hardly ever enough. I know this because I was on the set of Todd Phillips' Joker, and we ran scenes over and over because we had till dawn to shoot, and Joaquin would do something different in between cigarettes, and we just kept going over and over again. I watched a taxi flip like 5 times. Hollywood does repetition. This is what Babylon tells us. Over and over. Oh wait, could someone check on the camera guy in that box? We pry open the door. He falls out. He's died a heat stroke. Does anyone have an elephant? The sound guy's wake doesn't last more than a second before we're at the Hooray for Sound party celebrating a new sea change. Jack is there with his new wife, Estelle, a Broadway actress. Estelle is played by none other than Katherine Waterston. Seeing her on the screen again was like seeing an old friend from college that you'd spent so much time with for 4 years, and then she just completely disappears from your life forever. That's Katherine Waterston. I watched Joaquin spank her ass, and Fassbender deny paternity of her daughter, and Elizabeth Moss freak out over her, and every time she was great. And then she was gone. Her being back was almost like a commentary on Hollywood. This was the hottest bitch in town with Nepo backing, and she couldn't stay in the frame. What's that say about Nellie's chances of having a happy ending? Jack already seems on the defensive with his new wife, because what he does is considered low art compared to what Estelle does. Honestly, this movie doesn't do Jack's argument any favors, because immediately, here comes Nellie wearing only overalls, no shirt under it, and she has the entire shirtless USC football team and Eric Roberts behind her, where it's like, yeah, that is as low art as it gets. Sidney's still fighting with his bandmates, threatening to headbutt them, and his scenes could not be shorter. We need more of him, but we don't get it. Eleanor is introduced to Nellie's dad, and this plants the seed of the rattlesnake legend. This is an Eden moment where an apple is placed off limits. Jack has stopped his film as high art speech to go up and help old George again. In a moment of film as high art, George gets his head stuck in the toilet seat. Since things are moving at a nice clip, here comes Lady Faye to fuck it all up with more lesbian cabaret. She dances with a tranced out Nellie, and there's a near kiss that has less chemistry than George did with the toilet seat. Nellie doesn't kiss Lady Faye. The dance is broken up before their lips are sealed, and Diego watches it all happen from the cock chair. Sidney hasn't murdered his bandmate all night, so he's rewarded by Elle Fanning's ex-boyfriend, who gives Sidney his card since he knows he's going to need a studio band now that sound is popping off. Nellie retreats to the bathroom to have a little freak out that doesn't really work because no one really believes that Nellie wanted to kiss Lady Faye, but while she's in there, she overhears people talking shit about her, and she freaks out in a different way. It's this moment of fragility. It's this I, Tanya, cry, and she rallies, she storms out, she goes back to the party, and this is where she asks the party, "Who wants to see my dad fight a snake?" Everyone is drunk as hell, and of course they want to see her dad fight a snake, so they get in her car, and they drive out to the desert, and they totally end the party like they're Lady Faye Jew. When Nellie locates a rattler, the entire ensemble gets out of their car, then a drunk Eric Roberts approaches the snake. Nellie watches, transfixed, as her father goes full Gary Busey, and he's about to fight the snake, then he passes out. Face into the sand. This leaves Nellie having to do it herself. She's an entertainer after all, so she picks up the rattler, to everyone's horror, and the snake does what a snake does when it's disrupted. and it sinks his teeth into her neck. Nellie is appropriately panicked, running in circles, begging for help, and for once, a starlet chases George. Hurwitz's score returns as a drunk Jack watches this chaotic ballet play out in front of him. There's this beautiful sadness in his eyes. When you're spending all day in a tent, but you feel like you should be a warrior in battle, you can end up feeling repressed. Once the shoot is over, you'll yearn for the same type of grand spectacle that you've come accustomed to. You'll want to watch it unfold without cut or reset. You're born to entertain, and maybe you're more comfortable doing just that. So when a villain that needs to be defeated is announced in the most biblical of ways, you see a chance to unleash pandemonium. So you head out to the desert. Everyone heads out to the desert. You're young again. This is drinking in a cornfield where your parents won't catch you. And if the cops come, you know you'll run through the stalks, feeling totally alive, hiding and yelping with fun. This is that moment. So Jack, on instinct, starts running. He doesn't get more than 15 yards before a car smashes into him. This leaves Lady Faye to once again slow the pace of the film to a crawl as she casually walks over, kills the snake, then removes the poison from Nellie in the same way I wish a studio exec would have removed her character from the script. Nellie pops up like Uma in Pulp, now that the poison is gone, and she gets that kiss that she was owed. There's no reason for it to happen. It's dumb in the way Stephen King will write characters fucking in the middle of a life or death situation. It makes no sense. It doesn't happen in reality. These two characters would not do this. But they do. The show must go on. Nellie is alive. So is Jack. He's not in a wheelchair, so we leave the dry desert for a wet studio where they're shooting Singing in the Rain. As I record this week is the 72nd anniversary of the release of Singing in the Rain. Or, I don't know. Maybe it isn't. That could be a lie. I wasn't around. I just read that on X, so I'm repeating it here. There was this person that did a 38-post thread on Singing in the Rain, and it genuinely made me wonder, is this the Boy Geniuses burner? Out of the 38 posts, there were only 2 real interesting ones, and the first one was about 19-year-old Debbie Reynolds, how she still lived with her parents when she was shooting the film, and to get to set on time she had to wake up at 4 a.m. and take 3 buses. As the production schedule became more demanding, she began sleeping on set overnight. The second interesting post was that so many of the Singing in the Rain characters were based on real people. Studio head R.F. Simpson was a combination of Arthur Freed and Louis B. Mayer. Dora Bailey was a caricature of Luella Parsons in Zelda Zanders. The Zip Girl was Clara Bow from It Girl. This means in Babylon, Nellie, who's called Clara in the script, was playing the Zip Girl, who is a parody of Clara. Hey man, we don't call him Boy Genius for nothing. Since this whole Singing in the Rain situation looks a little weird to Jack, in a reverse of what normally happens, Jack gets a pep talk from George. It's a nice little moment and makes everything that happens to George later on hit all the more harder. Manny, now in a suit, arrives at craft services and speaks with Sidney, who declares that Manny has the cameras pointed in the wrong direction. He's kinda right. This is a new idea. Suddenly we're on set, and Sidney is in front of the cameras for his own film titled Harlem Trot. Elle Fanning's ex-boyfriend gives Manny props for an idea that wasn't his, but also kinda was. These jazz guys getting their own films really did happen in Hollywood, and it's cool to see Chazelle dramatize it. The Harlem Renaissance created a demand for black actors. Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong would get roped into these films because they became the reason why you need sound with your picture. The movie works. Things seem to be going great for Manny, to the point that Flea shows up and offers him a job. He starts giving exposition that Nellie is in gambling debt and the audiences are sick of her and find her pornographic. Once again, Manny is tasked with cleaning up Nellie's life. To do this, he gets the idea to rebrand Nellie. He's going to remake her into a lady. In the middle of a Don Draper pitch to Kinescope executives, Manny sees Nellie's outline in a nearby window, and he leaves in the middle of the pitch. I don't know why he would do this. He would obviously finish the pitch so that Nellie could hear what he wants for her and hear how the execs are supportive of it, but instead he just walks out. It's not how a human being would behave, but strangely, the Harvey Weinstein guy and Flea just go along with it like it makes total sense, and so, alright, this is the thing that happens. Now, Manny is Nellie's boss. He might be getting cucked by the movie's most pointless character, but he gets to direct as the soundtrack to the party they met at plays, so things are okay. For a moment. Even Sydney is moving up into a new mansion. He has a great car. He's a star. Now in the director's chair, no longer willing to sit in the cuck chair, Manny decides that one of the ways they'll fix pornographic Nellie is to get rid of Lady Faye. She manages to once again slow the pace of the movie, even when a fucking montage to party music is happening. Luckily, the montage ends with Jack on his phone. It's a striking moment where he hears that George struck out with a girl for one final time and shot himself. Even with the quiet moment, the momentum remains as Jack finally gets a sober monologue. What was once a good-natured high versus low art conversation with his Broadway wife now becomes a spilling of the soul. Finger pointed with an accusation, Jack declares that what happens up on that screen means something. A sold-out Broadway audience is a huge success on Broadway. When it comes to film, that same number of people is a fucking flop. Since Brad is my favorite actor, I ate this scene up, but when it ended, I looked around at the near-empty theater, and I couldn't help but feel a little sad. There's no time to sulk, though. The 1930s are here. Everyone's 20s are filled with debauched pleasure, while their 30s are filled with repercussions of behaving like that for a decade. The audience is getting smarter about talkies now. They've been able to see which silent stars have it. In Jack's case, it's not looking good, and he needs some reassurance. He's not sold on himself, and he doesn't have George to give him a pep talk anymore. The Nellie rebrand also continues to be wobbly, so Eleanor is tapped as her mentor and etiquette coach. This spawns a scene that honestly never should have been filmed. But when we talk about it later, how it originally appeared in the script, you'll understand that it's the lesser of two evils. Despite this, the lesser of two evils is still evil, and I mean, this scene sucks because it's such a heavy-handed high society commentary that says absolutely nothing new. Nellie is a star who is chased through the streets, and now we have to pretend like she hasn't been to a black tie event before. She knows how to navigate this space. This is nothing new for her, and yet we have to pretend like it is. It's honestly just like that weak-ass satire, like the Netflix style, white people, am I right? Manny and Sydney are at the party as well. They arrive with this weird military man-on-a-mission style score from Hurwitz that also doesn't work. Damien established that Nellie is getting a rebrand, and so this scene is just hitting that on the head where she's like, oh, speaking in a hidey-tidy voice and saying like, oh, I'm not familiar with that person, and sort of like embarrassing herself. And, you know, the Manny Mad Men pitch is when all of this should have happened. The pitch was like, I can fix her. And this scene is not her fixed. They go and do coke. And Manny is up there, doing it with her. The one part of the scene that kind of works is that Jack is at this party too, and everyone's sort of giving him condolences on his latest flop, and so he's like, fuck, this picture isn't working, is it? At one point in the party, he just goes, someone gonna tell me what the hell is going on? Because everyone is, you know, like tiptoeing around it, and he just doesn't have the decorum to be that guy. It's just too much for him. He's not the least well-behaved person at this party, though, because Nellie goes full Harley Quinn, which is just insane, but we do get the phrase, this is what a degenerate fucking animal from Jersey does. Which, of course, I have made my bio on my Tumblr page, because, I mean, representation matters, and, ugh. In another bodily fluid scene, there's this puking scene, which is just so Lady Faye Zhu. It should not be in the movie. But we get to push to 1932. Now, Eleanor is reviewing Jack. He's 2 flops deep, and it's becoming apparent that he can't make the transition to talkies. He's sober now, and he's still the highest paid actor. The fact that Damien stays on Brad this entire time as Brad is giving this interview is just perfect. Brad is so fucking watchable, and it really gives the impression that all is not lost for old Jack. He can still capture our attention. Maybe the audiences will catch on too. He can figure this out, right? Desperate striving isn't foreign for an actor. It's how they all start. He can do it again. He's done it before. At set with Manny, there's this realistic prop money that's brought into play, and there's a conflict that the rest of the band is too dark while Sydney looks light-skinned. We needed to spend more time on the money before we introduced one of the most heaviest moments in the film, but they just breeze by the cash, and here we are, and Damien has Manny filming Sydney under a light that does his complexion no favors. Like, you would fix the lighting to fix this issue, but, you know, we need this issue to exist so the conflict can exist, so I get what's happening. I'm not going to legislate it. Manny hands over a container of cork, which is like this black ash, and Sydney takes it. He's asked to do blackface as a black man. This coming from a Mexican loses something. They should have had the Weinstein stand-in do it. It would be a tougher pill to swallow coming from a big white boss man. This could be the white party satire, and it would hit a lot harder than some insensitive questions that they were asking Sydney. This is a heavy scene. Sydney dips his fingers into the cork. At the same time, Jack is realizing that he can't even get a meeting in town anymore, and this causes him to head to the studio. A scene that couldn't be more than 7 seconds long of Brad Pitt driving the coolest fucking car you've ever seen in your entire life is inserted here. And it's like, you spent 10 minutes on that worthless party, and now we get 7 seconds of the reason why cinema was invented? I mean, I would have watched Brad's commute to the studio in real time. It's just, oh, that shot. Damien, you were cooking, and you left the kitchen. We're back to Sydney. He applies the cork. He performs perfectly. He gets the applause. And then he wipes his face. He steps out into that unforgiving light of a perfect day outside. And when he walks by the studio guard, he confirms he won't be back. Brad can't have his meeting. And he notices a magazine. Eleanor did him wrong. She complimented him as a star, but in print, she said that he was over. This causes him to visit her at her office. He storms in. We think we're going to get another amazing Jack monologue, but instead, we hear from Eleanor. It's quiet in the room, except for Eleanor's reality check. She isn't as soft as George is. She lays it out to him. Jack blinks in a panic as he's told what he knows and what he's seen before, and even after he's told that it's over. He fights, not only for himself, but for the medium. It's the idea that sticks. There'll be 100 more Jack Conrads. Eleanor responds. The fact that Jack is being replaced by Clark Gable, and I can't tell you what Clark's last movie was, proves her right. Eleanor points out that the ghosts of film will endure. I don't need to know Clark's trajectory to know that Gone with the Wind is a masterpiece. His performance is great. Clark is dead, but only kinda. Fun fact, he died on my birthday. I mean, I wasn't born in 1960, but you get what I'm saying. He died on November 16th. I was born on November 16th. What year? It depends on if I want to lie to you or not. This is a Hollywood podcast after all, so I was born in 1990. Can you see my giant nose growing right now? Anyways, Jack takes in what he's being told. We watch something die in him a little. This is still the same man who stood on his balcony and screamed that cinema matters. He stood in front of his wife and screamed that cinema matters. He still believes it matters, but the star who couldn't make it in the talkies is now rendered almost silent. He leaves with a whisper. Thank you for that. The cockroach of a journalist gives Jack the opposite of what George used to. A percussion of knocks carries us into the next scene as Nellie shows up at Manny's door looking haggard and panicked. Manny lets her inside and she immediately begs for help. The underdeveloped gambling issue that Nellie has is brought to a head. Nellie declares that she's 85 grand in debt, and that's 1930s money. That seems like a shitload of cash. Once again, the dialogue goes weirdly contemporary as Nellie says that if she doesn't have the money to pay them back, they'll pour acid on her pussy. Nellie doesn't have the money because she sunk it into her dad's Wild Child diner and then gambled away the rest before taking on this credit. Manny finally explodes just as every man who's fallen in love with a Nellie-type girl does. As someone who exclusively dates BPD art hoes, I have to tell you, you don't really get used to the type of disappointment that comes along with trying to wrangle a girl mess. Every single time you can't believe what a fucking disaster she is. But, isn't that part of the excitement? It's better than coming home to a live, laugh, love house, you know what I'm saying? Manny doesn't want to let her go, just as we never do, because if you have the type of personality that attracts these girls, then you want to keep them at all costs. It's hard to find another one because they disappear randomly all the time. Manny promises to fix the situation, but doesn't even get a kiss for his trouble. A phone rings. We see Jack sitting by the fire with a drink. He contemplates not answering the call, but the night is lonely. The call is being made by Elle Fanning's ex-boyfriend, and he explains, Lee got sick mid-shoot. Jack has been around the block. He understands what this is. It's a favor. Jack is the type of guy who does favors for people. But this time, not without making Boss Man squirm a little bit. He forces Elle Fanning's boyfriend to admit that the movie Jack will be taking over is a piece of shit. Irving eventually confirms it is. Jack realizes he still has his instincts intact, and one of his strongest instincts is that he's a good actor. So he shows up to act. I can't tell if the boy genius is so talented that he can't make a bad movie even if he tries, or if what we're seeing when Jack arrives at set is through Jack's eyes. Because the truth is, the movie is beautiful. It's this seaside set with everyone calmly working, and Jack seems to realize, like, I might not be able to do this many more times. This isn't a favor to Irving. The fact that I'm here is a favor to me. This is what I love to do. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I look damn good doing it. It's a really nice scene. I mean, if the film that Jack is making there is a piece of shit, then I might like pieces of shit. Well, anyway, back to my podcast about Babylon. Instead of toning things down, Nellie is dealing with her fucked situation by blowing lines and looking like Jared Leto's mom in Requiem for a Dream. Manny said that he'd fix things, so that sort of lets her off the hook. She's free to do coke, and Manny doesn't really know how he's going to fix this whole thing until he gets a call. It's from the Count. The Count says he has the cash. Amazing. The problem is solved. It's solved almost too quickly. Oh well, no time to ask questions. We gotta get this money to the man with whom Nellie has a debt. The Count and his bag of cash ride with Manny to another castle of a mansion. In true Hollywood fashion, before they get out of the car, the Count negotiates a demand for a monologue in Manny's next picture. Manny will do anything for Nellie, so he says yes. The Count does not have it, for the record. They walk into the mansion, hand off the bag, and then instead of getting out of Dodge, they're invited to have a drink. With no choice, they're led upstairs to an opium balcony where none other than Tobey Maguire sits as the ghoulish James McKay. With yellow teeth and white face paint, McKay sits and seems like a child and also like a homeless man mixed into one. If the opening party is to show how fun the depravity of Hollywood can be, this party shows how easily it can go dark. This whole scene has to be a take on the Boogie Nights Alfred Molina scene. I mean, there's no way around it. It just follows the same beats and has the same weirdness and off-kilterness. And it's like two guys just sitting there as another weirdo holds court. And I mean, Manny wants to leave. He senses the vibes, but he knows that Hollywood is about handing over a shitload of money and then discussing horrible ideas over drinks. James McKay removes his black book, then pitches a film about a 50-year-old midget who poses as a child prodigy. This would be weird and quirky if it weren't for the fact that I think there's a Netflix documentary where there's like an orphan who does this exact same thing. So, I mean, maybe James was just really ahead of the curve there. There's a brief pause for drinks, and during the pause, the Count admits that the money is fake. Tony, the prop guy, gave it to him. This money is from Manny's picture. This money was briefly focused on, but like, I mean, honestly, Damien should have had the camera linger on it a bit more, because if you weren't paying attention on that scene, you'd be like, wait, what fake money? Where did there's just the potential for the audience to get lost, and they're in a scene with this James McKay character that is built up in the script, but not built up in the film at all. So all of this could feel like, what is going on? And it's probably when people bailed on the movie too. But, I was one of 3 people in there, and I wasn't going to walk out of this movie, and I was having the time of my life. So I sat there and I enjoyed Tobey Maguire chewing the scenery. James returns and he tries some more pitches. I think one might be about dinosaurs, maybe? Then he declares he has a must-see star for one of his movie ideas. Manny is now desperate to leave. He knows that there's like a ticking time bomb in that case, but he can't go. He has to go along with what James says. So, they head out to see this new star. They arrive at the tunnel under Ocean Boulevard, and it's declared that it's the only place left that anyone can have any fun these days. James clearly wasn't invited to one of Don's parties. The music goes frantic, then we enter the asshole of Los Angeles and descend down into hell. Down one rung, then another. We're still not there. We need to descend lower. Oh, and don't mind that huge fucking alligator. Torches burn. Water drips. We see the horns of the devil as the roar of the crowd rises into the mix, then becomes a chant. Who are they chanting for? What are they chanting for? You either a star or you aren't, Tobey says, and we watch Diego's eyes finally show true horror, because he is not. But they've reached the star of the show. He's a roided-out brute that Tobey is thrilled to see. This brute's unique talent is that he eats live mice. I'm not sure if he has a future in Hollywood, but I think he could be a real star in the pest control sector. Tobey begins to ask for cash to goad the freak on, to have him eat more mice. And for some reason, Tobey's goon is still carrying around the $80,000. Like, hey guys, maybe if you're entering the asshole of Los Angeles, leave the $80K at home. But the money's here, and Tobey's handed it. He balls up the first 20, throws it on stage, and is hooting and hollering. Tobey is handed a second 20, and Manny is in full I'm gonna shit my pants mode because his worst fear is realized and a drop from the cave-like ceiling lands on the bill. James, in incredibly low visibility, sees the ink run on the bill and he realizes he's been had. Guns are drawn and Manny murders Tobey's goon with a mace? Like, you didn't hear that wrong. You aren't misremembering. Or maybe I am. Like, wait, let me Google this to make sure I'm not hallucinating this part of the movie, because there's no way that Manny murders a man with a... Okay, I just looked it up, and Manny literally murders a man with a mace. I mean... What the fuck? How does that choice stay in the film? He's our audience surrogate. He is us. We murder a man with a mace. To get out of this situation, there's like this horror movie race out of hell, but Manny and the Count survive and they get in a car and they drive. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, the Count should have been killed by ghoulish Tobey Maguire instead of our protagonist and audience surrogate. And to that, I respond back to you. I really wish you worked at Paramount when this movie was being greenlit. Almost as though she senses that pages that should have been cut from the script are scrolling across the screen, once again, Lady Faye appears. She's not in the asshole of LA, but instead in a party where Jack is hanging out with the model Taylor Hill, who, I mean, have you seen Taylor's Instagram posts recently? What's with that, like, page boy haircut? She must have like gone through a massive breakup or something, but why do beautiful women regularly do this to themselves when they're already like in crisis and they're like, I know what'll fix the crisis, ruining my hair. That won't make me wake up with regret every single morning for months on end. Okay, I think I've maybe lost whatever credit I had for not being a misogynist with my Margot Robbie as perfect tits moment there. And I'd like to apologize to Taylor Hill. The hair is growing in very nicely. Your last post, you looked very cute, a little French, no longer like a page boy. So I apologize. It's just like, there's something about Lady Faye where I would like rather think about anything else than the scene that she's in. Luckily, in this scene, we also have Brad Pitt, so it's easier. It's actually pleasurable. Jack and Faye have a little sidebar catch-up. Despite being congratulated by passers-by, Jack admits that the movie he's in is shit. They banter a little while longer and then sit like almost in a silence, and Jack reclines and you can feel his breaths, and he says, I'm tired, Faye. Jack was so important to what was made, to film. He had worth. They needed him. Now, they don't need him. He built something that sustains itself. They're new people now. They're building it in a different direction. It's not better or worse. It's just not what it once was. And Jack's services are no longer needed. Had a good run, didn't I? Jack ponders. And Lady Faye's response doesn't matter, as usual. She leaves. Jack sits by the fire, taking it all in. Last time we saw him like this, a call came in. He was asked to go to set. He was able to act again. He was able to do what he loved. This time, no one shows up. He walks over to Taylor, he excuses himself, and then he heads upstairs. On the way, he compliments a bellhop and tosses him the biggest tip the bellhop's ever received. Then he keeps climbing. He almost sashays down the hall, walking with the pure cool that Brad moves with. He keys into his room, shuts the door behind him, but it doesn't latch, so it begins to open slowly. We're able to watch Jack move through the room. We linger, voyeurs. When Jack walks into the bathroom, we see a gun in his hand. Before we can mentally yell, no, Jack's brains have repainted the bathroom. Manny throws open the door to his house. He finds a passed-out Nellie. Rousing her, he tells her that they're going to Mexico. They rush into the car with the Count, then head to his apartment. Nellie is still blowing lines, manic as hell. Manny stops to gas up the car. Nellie disappears on some Harley Quinn shit again. She finds a raging party directly across from the gas station that seems to have been going all night, or something. I mean, what time is it? Isn't it like 5:30 in the morning? It was nighttime when they went into that asshole of Los Angeles, and they came out, and then Manny got home. It has to be like 5 in the morning. And in this unexplainable party, Nellie suddenly sobers up. She declares that it's the end of the road for her. She says that she's at peace with this being her final act. Manny won't accept it. Things are worse than ever, but his love is still there. He professes this love, and Nellie cries into her hands like a little girl. Manny proposes, and Nellie agrees to go with him in the most I have no other options type of way. Again, the non-period dialogue happens, and Nellie gives like this Chappelle style, I'm Nellie Leroy, bitches! Which just, I have no idea why this scene happens. And I still can't get a grip on the time. Suddenly it's night, and like I still have no idea the time frame here, because like he's now gone back to the Count's apartment where like, leave the Count. The Count will be fine. He didn't mace someone in the neck. He's going to be all right. You don't need to take him with you. A smart man would never do this. Someone who's known Nellie for more than a decade, would never leave her alone. The audience loves Nellie, and we don't give a fuck about the count. And yet Manny goes for the count, and he leaves Nellie. She's all alone. Just like she said she was. Sure, she could sit in the car, but she knows the danger she's in. And for Manny to be walking back into one of the most obvious places for James's goons to be looking for him is the type of situation where it's got like a 50% chance of ending in death. Is Nellie going to sit in the car and wait for that to figure out if she killed Manny in an indirect way? Nellie crashed into Manny's life, and instead of another collision, she gets out of the vehicle. She drifts away from it, quietly, into the night. We watch her go. She dances into the darkness. We wait for her to reemerge. Just get back in the car, you'll figure it out. We don't see Nellie. She stays in the dark. Manny doesn't realize this. He's in the Count's dirty apartment demanding that he collect his things so they can leave California. Time is up, and the door is kicked in. One of James's goons immediately kills the Count's roommate, then moves to the Count. Blood splatters everywhere. This leaves Manny shaking, covered in that blood, and pissing himself. And so the assassin shoots Manny because of course he does, since this guy just screwed over his boss and witnessed a double homicide. And oh wait, no, he doesn't. He does nothing to Manny. He takes $50 from him and then just says get out of town and leaves, despite the fact that Manny could easily pick this guy out of a lineup, and Manny has killed James's right-hand man. It would be just an eye for an eye at this point. Of the two guys who are in, or of the three guys that are in that place, Manny's the guy who should have deserved that bullet, and he doesn't get it. I mean, I'm not going to dwell on this. I'm going to make like Nellie and disappear. Instead of going through this illogical moment, Manny returns to his car. He finds Nellie gone. He's all alone now. A person who isn't all alone, who isn't isolated, who isn't violent, is Sidney. He's now on stage in a small black jazz club. He's full of joy, playing what he wants the audience to hear, and what the audience wants to hear from him. He tells his journey to them through his playing, and we listen to it all throughout the epilogue. Jack's road came to an end by his own hand, and even though the Roaches outlived him, his funeral is full, and everyone seems to feel as though they didn't appreciate him enough when he was still there. Another death occurs, but this one doesn't receive the fanfare Jack's does. Eleanor's obituary appears on the screen, and in a cutting joke, it flashes so fast the audience can't read the words. But it's not all death. In Hollywood, there's always new life arriving daily. The stars of tomorrow are shown, smiling with promise. We watch as buildings fall, and are built, and fall, and are built, and are built, and are built. Sprawling lots, set after set, expand as wide as the frame. Variety headlines detail the growth, and we scan down, under the headline, to the bottom left corner of the front page, where a little box contains an article on Nellie Leroy's death at 34. Her entire life only takes up 2 paragraphs. Sidney's song just as a bus pulls away from the curb. A Hispanic family has gotten off it. There's a father with thinning hair, wearing a cardigan, and we realize this is Manny. Next to him is his wife and his daughter. It's now the 50s. Kinescope still exists. Manny stands at its gates. A security guard starts talking to him, and Manny explains that he used to work there, and he now owns a radio shop in New York City. Instead of being able to share his old life with his family, Manny allows his daughter to go take a nap, and his wife says that she'll babysit while Manny takes a walk down memory lane. Alone and slightly overwhelmed by how things have changed, Manny sees what L.A. is now. He passes by a movie theater with new stars on the posters, and he's about to continue on, but almost as though he caught sight of an old lover, he doubles back. At the box office, he pays 50 cents, then steps inside the theater. It's a pretty packed house, so Manny has to sit in the balcony. A musical streams forward in front of him, and after he settles in, his eyes start to get heavy. Like a true old guy, Manny falls asleep in the theater. The nice thing about seeing a movie instead of a play is that your attention isn't mandatory. The performers don't look back at you. You can even get a hand job as long as your row is empty. Jack should have mentioned that to his wife when they were debating cinema versus the theater. When Manny does wake up, the movie is still going, but when he looks to the screen, he sees his life. He has to watch it through tears as the Horowitz score plays Nelly's theme. What was once his whole life is now entertainment. Manny trembles with sobs. The rest of the audience doesn't take notice. They have no idea who they're watching this film with. A couple is making out. A mom looks at her happy daughter. A little boy sleeps. Everyone sits in the theater just as I sat with those two people watching Babylon. Then, the opening notes of Singing in the Rain begin as the camera returns to Manny's tear-stained face. Suddenly, we're no longer watching a light pole being gripped in the rain. Now we're watching black and white footage of Manny on the studio lot. We're watching Nellie crying on cue. We're watching Jack making out at the battlefield. We're watching Lady Faye smoking like a dragon. We're watching Sidney blowing his trumpet. Then, Nellie kisses Manny deeply. On that screen, that Hollywood kiss finally happens. We see Nellie bursting out of the party and the black and white turns to color. Nellie is back in the party. She's being carried. Horowitz's infectious music is playing again. As Manny declares he wants to be part of something bigger, something that means something, we go back, way back, to the beginning of film. The first tests to show movement, a gun being fired. These are seconds of scenes, the yellow brick road, in cartoons, in chariots, in eyes being cut, in Anna Karina, in forums, in art, in CD animation, in CGI, in dinosaurs, in the Matrix Code, in Avatar, whose sequel is playing only a theater away. Then, the chemical process falls across the screen. This is a chemical process after all. But then we see Nellie, or Margot, or at this point, it's all fallen away. That woman appears in the film reel. A star in the movie, and a star in real life, and a star in a real-life movie. But both of them only exist now if these chemicals are cared for, if this film is cared for. These films were on cellulose, nitrate-based film stock, which is inherently unstable, highly flammable, and prone to rapid decomposition if not properly conserved. Will Jack Conrad live on? That question is tragic, but in the case of Babylon, it's also a little fun. Jack and Nellie really could have existed. Maybe their film stock had just decayed, and we don't know that they're there, but they are here. Their memory could still be strong enough that new films are being made about them, that Babylon is not the last film that will be made, that we'll keep telling their story, and maybe next time we'll be a little more careful how we treat them. Eventually it's only colors and a clapboard reading Babylon, and then we're back to Manny, and he sits in the dark, and he smiles, not alone, but surrounded. That is the boy genius, Damien Chazelle's Babylon. One could say that the film that I just analyzed is Chazelle's untouched vision, but when we go to the screenplay, we're presented with a very different experience. Want some examples? There's a scene with a dog at the party that's cut out. Nellie is literally Clara Bow in the script. Sidney is violent, breaking his saxophonist's nose. George is Paul Byrne. Faye is Anna May Wong. Manny doesn't confess his love to Nellie in Spanish. He does it in English, but she just doesn't hear him. There's an incredibly important scene where Don Brady, who we know as Don Wallach, shows Sidney the Vitaphone, sound on wax cylinder, synced with picture. Sidney bonds with Don, giving him the truth he needs to hear when the people in the room don't. He says to Don, "I think I've seen the future." In the script, Clara's dad is the type of person that Rob Zombie would write, so he's mercifully toned down in the film. The script makes it clear that Dorothy Asner is the inspiration for Damien's wife, Ruth Asner. Dorothy was one of the only woman directors in the golden age of Hollywood studio system. She directed The Wild Party that starred, you guessed it, Clara Bow, in her first talking picture. It was on this picture that the boom mic was invented. Of all the stories that go from script to screen, Jack's remains the most unchanged. I think you could probably just assume that based on how the movie feels. Jack's heartbeat runs through the picture. We know exactly who he is. There's this handshake between Pitt and Chazelle. They make sure that Jack Conrad was absolutely believable as the Golden Age superstar. I half believe that if I logged into Mubi right now, I could watch a Jack Conrad movie. For Jack scenes, there's this absolutely great explainer of how they locate the snake that Nellie fights. Chazelle has one of the USC guys ask, "Does anyone know how we're going to find the snake?" And Jack declares, "I've played trackers. I know where to look." Jack then beelines to Eric Roberts, and dead serious, very lucid now, he says, "Have you ever actually fought a snake before? If we're going to do this, a snake needs to be fought. I'm happy to jump in and do the fighting, but I don't want to get in the way of whatever's going on with you and your daughter." Jack then snatches the band leader's baton and leads the crowd to the door like an intoxicated Pied Piper. In my favorite cut set piece, after Jack is told by Thalberg that Clark Gable is the big dog now, Damien blasts this buckshot of broken dreams across the page. Actor Antonio Valdez is found by his maid with his brains blown out. Willie Boyle, you remember that fat piss pig from the first scene? Well, he's found engaged in a different water sport of face-down swimming. Actress Olga Oleney, Virginia Woolf's herself. Actor Lou Telligen stabs himself repeatedly in the chest with a golden pair of scissors, just in case the heavy-handed metaphors weren't enough yet. Model actress Gwildy Andre sits on a pile of her newspaper clippings, then lights them ablaze in a self-immolation. And finally, the police and medics swarm a house, enter a bedroom, and there, amongst a buckshot of pills, is the decomposing corpse of Ruth Asner, the director who saw a muse in Nellie. On the flip side, just as one could assume that Jack's story remained uncut, it's very easy to assume that at least 30 pages of Lady Faye's story was cut out as well. She couldn't be that thin of a character on the page, right? There was a rich history to draw from since Lady Faye is Anna May Wong in the script. She was the first Chinese-American film star in Hollywood. She worked in America throughout the 20s, then went to Europe for a good portion of the 30s. She did have her share of trials, losing a leading role to Louise Rayner, who performed in Yellowface. In the 50s, she was the first Asian American to have her own TV show as the lead. Is any of this in the script? Well, no, not really. The script has her shooting heroin with Sidney. In another scene, the script has her shooting heroin with Sidney. I mean, this bitch loves heroin in the script. There's a subplot about, like, China calling Miss Wong a puppet of the West who disgraces the Middle Kingdom, but, you know, like, I think we know why that got cut. Paramount looked at this picture and they're like, we're going to need every international market we can get, so there's no way we're saying that. What's left from Anna May's story is that she packs up her stuff, her notepad and a picture of her as a girl in a play, and then she kisses her parents goodbye and signs one last headshot, then she steps out of the laundromat and gets into a cab. She leaves from New York Harbor on a ship. I have no idea how people got from, like, LA to China in the 30s. I mean, that trip doesn't seem worth it. I guess, like, a train from LA to New York, then a ship from New York to, like, I don't know, whatever continents connect on the other side. I'm not a smart man. That's why I'm doing a podcast on Babylon and not, like, healthy sleep habits. I'm a dummy. Anyways, Manny is another character that doesn't really have a powerful identity in the film, and so he should have more pages in the script, but it's really not there. And this is why I was struck by how odd it was that Damien is quoted in a GQ article that reads, in part, "After production wrapped on Babylon, a 1920s Golden Age Hollywood epic, actor Diego Calva received some advice from the film's director, Damien Chazelle. Go, travel the world. Walk your town with no problem. Your life is about to really change. I know you love movies, and sometimes I feel guilty because I'm literally about to make it so you can't walk down the street," Calva remembers the director telling him. I don't need to tell you that this never happened. I mean, I'd bet the amount of money that could result in my dick being turned into a pussy via an acid bath that you're never going to see Diego Calva in another big screen $80 million movie. I mean, hell, I'd wager that you're never going to see him outside of Babylon unless you really watch Netflix originals. The big change between Script Manny and Film Manny is that he gets to fuck. Like, in that, you remember that deeply broken high society scene? This changes in the script because in the script, it's William Randolph Hearst's house that happens in. And that adds so much to it. Like, I don't know why they took that out. And we could have had the Mank-verse. Fincher could have done that thing that like Tarantino did for Sin City, where he came in and directed a scene where like Fincher directs Mank and William Randolph Hearst hanging out with Nellie Leroy, but then like in Mank was the Clara Bow. Who is Amanda Seyfried playing? She was playing Clara Bow, right? So maybe that would be a problem where like Amanda Seyfried and Margot Robbie would look at each other and it would be like this weird thing where like, remember in Southland Tales where like Sean William Scott shakes hands with himself and it closes a time rip, or it's the end of the world based on your interpretation, which you can get a good interpretation of that if you read my novelization of Southland Tales. And I'm not saying I have a thing for like movies that are huge, massive box office flops, but I did novelize Southland Tales, and now here we are in hour 3 of my Babylon podcast. So maybe I have a personality defect, or maybe I'm just a failed artist who wants to help out my boys. You know, like, big ups Damien Chazelle, big ups Richard Kelly. Anyways, I'm going delirious. Why are you still listening to this? Like, Brad Pitt, if you're listening to this, I'm honestly not like this. I'm a really normal guy. Please, Brad Pitt, forgive me. Forgive me, Brad Pitt. So... And this party, I mean, this party goes with the vibe of how psychotic I am right now, because Maddie takes a gold pill and he hallucinates that the entire party is populated with humanoid penguins. Yeah. No, I'm going to take a deep breath here. Manny sees all of the party goers as humanoid penguins. And then he fucks Nellie in a broom closet. This is true. In the sex scene, there are giant chickens all around them, and the chickens explode when Manny comes. I am not lying. I am not delirious. You can look this up. Email me at tjamesreagan@yahoo.com and I will send you a PDF of the script. This is not me gaslighting you. This is not me doing a Damien Chazelle GQ quote. Manny comes and chickens explode. And, you know, Manny fucking Nellie really does change their dynamic, but the Nellie in the script isn't even Nellie. She's straight up Clara Bow, and so of course she's going to be different. All right, let's get back on track. I have this really cool scene to show you. So remember in the movie, there's sort of like that simple scene where Sidney gets his house and his car. Well, there's a corresponding scene where Clara gets her house and car, and she gives a tour to Eleanor, and they walk through the house. And so I'm going to read exactly what Damien writes because it's so fucking good. Okay, Damien writes, doors open. Clara ushers a notes-taking Eleanor into her new home. Excitedly, she gives her and us the grand tour from room to room. Eleanor, in voiceover, says, I was lucky enough to visit her home on the weekends. And Clara is just yapping. She's like, that's from Spanish something, and that's my teddy bear. I call him Valentino, and here's the living room. I just call it the lovin' room. And Damien notes, this house is insane. It's the biggest jumble of styles imaginable. It's French next to Navajo, next to Greek, next to Japanese. It's cheap and rare side by side. A Ming Dynasty lamp next to a 10-cent store couch. A weird doll in a skirt, one red eye, and one green eye. And this is me here. I'm not sure if this is like the doll is a metaphor or if we're talking about a literal doll that Clara has, but either way, like, it just makes me laugh so much. I love it. And so Clara continues and she says, that's my boyfriend, Cole, say hi. And Cole, a burly boxer, waves. And here's my Chinese room, and there's a god they worship there, and that's a painting of my favorite cowboy, Tim Minks, she says, pointing to a gaudy canvas. That's me with my mom. She tried to kill me with a knife that summer. Oh, and in this room is my cousin Roy, and he's come to stay with us. Say hi, Roy. And he's had some troubles with the law lately, but okay, that's my bed, and I put a mirror on the canopy, and then over here's my dad. He's my cook and my business manager. Robert Bow cooks macaroni, nods. Another guy waves. That's my second cousin, Jerry. He also came to stay with us. He's fine as long as he stays away from playgrounds. Then the doorbell rings. Clara hurries to answer it. A gorgeous man steps in. He grabs Clara in his arms and kisses her. The gorgeous man says, "Missed you, darling." And Cole, rightfully curious, yells out, "Who the fuck is that?" Eleanor turns to find Cole has reappeared, holding a bowl of Robert's macaroni. Clara stumbles. Cole, this is Carl, The gorgeous man, Carl, interrupts. Her boyfriend. Clara, who is this? Her boyfriend, Cole gags. Clara tries to laugh it off like, hey, my dad made macaroni. Then, what transpires is a good old-fashioned food fight. Everyone is wearing macaroni by the end, but Clara is also wearing a grin. Margot would have had the most fun with this scene. Like, could you imagine Margot Robbie doing this? We should just crowdfund Margot shooting this scene and just splice it into Babylon. Okay, and it sucks to lose that scene, but I'm about to tell you another scene that is crucial to the movie's plot. Without this scene, you have an incomplete movie. And they cut it. But good thing we have 40 minutes of Lady Fei Zhu killing the momentum. I mean, geez, you'll be as better as I am. I'm going to read this to you now. So you remember when Nellie goes to New York to see her mom? Instead of her heading out of a theater, she goes to New York because she's hiding, because she has a gambling debt. That's what happens in the script. Clara says that anytime Brady gets pissed, she gambles. And this sets up the whole acid on my pussy scene in the film that kind of comes out of left field. It's like architecture that Damien or Paramount pulled out and it left things super wobbly. Like, okay, remember when Sydney puts on the cork and they can't find Nellie? Well, this is the perfect setup for the pussy acid situation because Nellie is actually in a shitty desert casino. She's at a blackjack table and she's coked up and she's going full tilt. Like, is there a full tilt? I know full tilt is poker. Can you full tilt blackjack? Because if you can, Nellie's doing it. It's a mess. And so she demands more chips, and she's getting them on credit, and she signs whatever they're putting in front of her. And who do you guess is there? Who do you think gets called to this? None other than that ghoul, Tobey Maguire's James McKay. James introduces himself to Clara, and he articulates the size of the debt that Clara is accruing with him. And, all right, let's just say Clara is a little less than receptive to the information that she's given. And this results in a Scorsese-style scene where Clara is pulled into a back room. And do you want to guess what's in this back room? I'll give you a moment. Think hard. What do you think is in the back room? It's a vat of acid that you could pour on a woman's pussy. So it's that whole context for the scene. This scene is insanely crucial. You need this scene. The movie doesn't work without this scene. It's in the script. Damien knew that you needed this scene. This is infuriating. I'm pissed. I'm pissed. I'm going to call up Paramount. I'm canceling my Paramount Plus. This is a travesty. And now I'm going to get madder. All right. Did I plan this podcast to have an off-the-rails third act? I don't know. Maybe I did. Maybe I did this subconsciously. Maybe Babylon is so influential, the boy genius is so inspiring that I followed his path. And that shows that Babylon is a success. Because, I mean, obviously this podcast is a success. Otherwise, how would I have less than 100 subscribers? Anyways, this brings us to Sydney. And this pisses me off so fucking bad what was done to Sydney. Because in a pathetic attempt at the only reason Lady Faye is there is for diversity, and this diversity sidelined a black character. This is an amazing character arc. This is a black character that we haven't seen on screen before either. In the script, it's so good. And I know you're probably thinking, like, how could Sydney be this good? How could Sydney have a love story when he was the only guy who got less pussy than Manny in Babylon? And that's because his entire love interest, Zora, was cut out of the entire movie. As far as I can tell, she doesn't exist for a single frame in the movie. And if she does, she has no speaking parts. And there are 100 speaking parts in this movie, so there was room for her. You know how, like, in Atonement, they're like, I gave Robbie and Keira Knightley their moment together because they were never actually able to have it. Well, I'm about to atone for Sidney Palmer, and I'm about to give him his moment. This is it. It's atonement time. So follow along with me. And by the end, you're going to be heartwarmed and frickin' pissed. I'm going to go into too much detail because I love Sydney as a character in the script. So, an hour into the movie, Sydney's given his love interest. He's performing at a black and tan cabaret with an orchestra. And as he's playing, his eyes fall on a beautiful black woman in the crowd. And her name is Zora. She's in her 30s, she's well dressed, she's poised, and luckily for Sydney, he has this superpower, and he shows it off. He plays better than he even did at the opening party. How does Zoya react? Does she fall in love with him instantly? No. She turns and walks out the door. Sydney has to finish his solo, but he can't stop thinking about Zora and her abrupt departure. The moment his solo is done, he hops off the stage and flees like it's on fire. And he's quick enough on his feet that he's able to find Zora waiting to cross the street. And instead of like playing it cool and, sliding up to her, he confronts her. And he asks her what she's doing, like why she left. And she gives him a little attitude, and so he informs her, no one has ever walked out on a solo of mine. No one. But, this like slapping your dick out on the table, it doesn't impress Zora. She walked out on your solo. You're not going to convince her retroactively that you're this maverick. But Sydney does it anyways. He states his credentials. He says, I'm the best horn player in LA. But Zora is really quick and she responds, oh, so that makes you 200th best in New York. And since asserting him isn't working, Sydney decides that he's going to get to know Zora. And he starts asking, what do you do? And Zora explains that she's a writer of poems and novels. And Sydney tries to banter back and he says, so you're unemployed. And any novelist has heard this one before. Trust me. FYI. And for the single ladies listening to this, yes, my new novel, Pushing Closer, is out now. But as of right now, today, I also have a full-time job. I can take you out on a date and pay for it. I will pay for it. Whatever you do, as long as you just go with me and you don't Zora me. Well, Zora right now. Later on, we need our love story will be like Zoya and Sydney later on. But all right, do you see how that so you're unemployed quote threw me off? And so like in the same way I got fucked up, Zora gets fucked up about the comment and she starts to whimper and she's like, it's okay, I'm employed. It's just so hard. And Sydney is like, oh, fuck. And, Sydney begins to apologize. And once he starts doing that, suddenly Zora's healed and she finishes her sentence. It's hard to take anything remotely serious coming from a third-rate Kid Ori reject who's so insecure he chases his walkouts down the street without realizing the stay-ins only stay in because they're too fucked up to notice his out-of-tune, uninspired, shitty, embroche, wannabe Satchmo ass. Sydney's like standing there and he's just stunned for a moment. But now his band leader is outside too, like, Sid, what are you doing? Get back inside. And so Sydney looks back at his band leader and then turns back to Zora and asks for her number. And Zora just walks away. Again. Walks out of his life one more time. And Sydney watches her go. But as fate would have it, he sees her again. You remember that party with Nellie and the USC football team and how Sydney's band played at it? Well, in the script, Zora just so happens to be saddled up at the bar during that party, and Sydney sees this as his chance to make another move. This time, to reject him, she would have to walk out of a pretty damn good party, so he's liking his odds. Sydney's opening line is, "So, still a wannabe Satchmo?" Zora looks at him, then responds, "Undecided." Close by, Anime starts performing along with Sydney's band, sans Sydney. That band leader who had to retrieve Sydney from the curb is pissed, again. It would be a shame to waste a perfect moment gifted to him by the fates, so Sydney keeps the conversation going, telling Zora that he read her book. He explains that Anime keeps up on all the intellectual shit, and she knew how to get a copy of Zora's book. In an attempt at the same banter they had when they met, Zora asks, "And what did you think of my intellectual shit?" Sydney responds, "It was intellectual, but it wasn't shit." "Intellectual usually is?" Zora asks. "No," Sydney responds. "Mahler was an intellectual, but you think too much, and you lose the pulse. Music? It's about pulse." "Uh-huh," Zora responds. "That's why you put junk in your veins and act like a hothead?" Sydney tries the machismo route and says, "When I play, I'm a bull seeing red. You don't fuck with me. It's called focus." "No," Zora asserts. "It's called a problem. And where's your focus now? You should be up there." "My focus is right here," Sydney purrs, but Zora still isn't biting and warns, "You're gonna lose your job." Sydney asks Zora for her number, but Zora once again refuses. Defeated, Sydney returns to the bandstand, but Zora's read of the situation was correct, and the bandleader literally throws Sydney's horn at him, case and all. Sydney is stunned, but his first concern isn't the job. He's worried about his horn. He opens up the case and he's hit with another unbelievable moment. The horn is in perfect condition. That's not what has him staggered. It's what's been placed atop it. It's a piece of paper. Sydney removes the paper and sees a phone number, and below it, a letter. Z. When God closes one door, he opens a trumpet case. So, with the number, after the party, Sydney makes this call. And remember that scene of Sydney being shown around his nice new house after his contract happens? Well, in the script, Sydney is the one showing off the house. And he's showing it to Zora. In a grand romantic gesture he's clearly planned for a while, there are these 3 wooden desks lined up in what will be Zora's writing room. Why 3? So she can choose her favorite. Like any ambitious woman, Zora declares that she wants all 3 desks. Why? Well, for the first, she'll write her poetry. The second is for writing manuscripts. And the third is to lay back on and show Sydney just how grateful she is. And by that I mean that they fuck on it. So, they fuck on it. And after they're laying there on the fucking desk, the extravagance of their situation sets in, and Zora asks Sydney if he's concerned about how all of this was possible. They're keeping the 3 desks, and Sydney's okay with it. And Sydney shrugs it off, but Zora reminds him that the money that is fueling this new lifestyle is coming from an industry that made Birth of the Nation. It's coming because a cracker put on blackface. And Sydney responds, well, we could move into a 1-room bedroom. And finally, he gets a laugh from Zora. Sidney's final scene is far richer than what he gets in the film. We're back at that club where he first met Zora, but he's returned a different man. But in some ways, he's still the same. He hasn't changed in the most important way. He walks up and he asks an employee of the club if they're looking for a trumpet player. The employee knows exactly who he's talking to, and the impossibility of the moment causes him to say that they don't have space. Sidney knows how he looks, and so he says, "I'm willing to audition." But he's interrupted by the employee being like, "My point is, we can't afford you." "You can," Sidney assures him. And the employee processes this for a moment, and then it's like off to the races. Night falls, the club fills, and Zora is in the crowd again. This time, she's not alone. She's holding hands with a little 2-year-old boy. When the boy sees Sidney, he exclaims, "Daddy," and rushes over to him. Sidney scoops his son up in his arms, and then when Zora reaches him, he gives her a kiss. After setting his son down, Sidney runs his hand along his tux, then asks, "How do I look?" "Like the best horn player in L.A., Zora responds, an echo from the past, a confirmation of worth. Sidney has it all, and this time, he knows not a single soul is going to walk out during his solo. He returns to the bandstand, then the music begins. Zora and her boy are seated, then they look on, happy and proud. Damien writes, "We push in on Sidney as he launches into a solo. He's impressed us before, but this is the most beautiful thing he's played yet. All at once, the frailty we noticed in him outside melts away. We reveal a raw, unfettered power. There's fire in his notes, a sustained cry in the sound. There's pain and heartbreak and deep, deep regret. But also, there's hope and strength and resilience and a fuck you defiance. And finally, there's love. True and bountiful love." Sidney opens his eyes, looks at the audience, looks at Zora and his boy, his family, and he brims with tears. All the pent-up feelings, he pours them into the music. No more frailty, yes, but no more machismo either. There's no more bravado that his music used to exhibit. This is effortless force and pure, sublime emotion. I read that to you because that's the ending that Sidney deserved. And now that we've given him his ending, it's time to move on to Damien's ending. You know how it was hard to figure out how time was passing in the film version of the final act? The script simplifies this. Manny gets home at dawn. He gets Nellie out of bed and they hop into the car with the Count. They show up at Nellie's dad's house and they get her passport, then they get back on the road. Before the random-ass early morning party thing that they show up to in the movie, we get a callback to the moment in the taxi where Manny opened up to Nellie that his family lives in East LA, but he doesn't make an effort to see them. This time, with his girl, Manny shows up at his rundown family home and he brings the Count and Nellie inside. Manny's mom can't believe the prodigal son has returned. His dad and siblings rush to confirm the impossible. Manny is back. The warmth of this reunion is short-lived, and Manny, trained to think on his feet, immediately starts setting up plans for a Mexico escape. Amongst this whirlwind of an arrival, Manny's little sister asks for an autograph from Clara, and it's this pure little moment where we see Clara be a star to a little girl. Then, as soon as they arrive, they leave. That dumb scene at the Count's apartment happens, and that dumb scene in that random-ass party happens, but it's sort of fixed in the script because this time it happens at a bar, and there's more significance. It works a little better. Instead of Manny watching transfixed as Nellie dances in the center of a packed party, like that day they first met, this time, Manny is pressed up against Nellie's sweaty body in the most intimate dance in a near-empty bar. The dumb scene at the Count's apartment still happens, and there's still no reason given for why the assassin, who shoots 2 men in rapid succession, doesn't shoot Manny, but we move past it quickly. Nellie's ending somehow manages to make even less sense in the script, though, because during their slow dance, Damien goes into detail about how Manny is the love of her life and all she ever needed, and I guess the idea is that to save Manny's life from this BPD art hoe, she has to disappear into the night, but let me tell you, I've been left by many a BPD art hoe, and it destroys you every single time. It's honestly just easier to deal with whatever crisis she's in than to have her love you and leave you in the morning, and you're just like a stranger left wondering what the hell happened. And Damien's script ends in a much simpler way as well. Instead of all of film's history being projected into Manny's mind's eye, it's only Singing in the Rain. Now, after coming to the end of my journey with Babylon, it's easy to see Damien in that theater instead of Manny. Imagine that projector blasting out images of 8.5 and Boogie Nights, in It, in La Dolce Vita, in Sunset Boulevard, in Umbrellas of Schoenberg, in Singing in the Rain, just like in the film. You know what? I like that idea. Let's give that a try. I'm going to read the script, but instead of the name Manny, I'm going to use the boy genius's name. And action. Damien looks at the audience, first in disbelief, then in anger. How can they laugh so innocently, so callously? He glares, pissed, contemptuous. He looks back at the screen, furious to see events that he feels so close to so glibly mocked. He keeps watching, the movie becoming even more personal now. The scene of a movie premiere where Jean Hagen's character, dolled up like an elegant princess, recites highfalutin lines in her nasal Brooklynese. The spectators on screen roar with laughter, as do those around Damien. Tears begin to well in Damien's eyes until, finally, he begins to cry. He can't hold it in. It's all too much. The shock of recognition. The looking into the mirrorness of it all. He sits there, weeps, yet keeps hearing laughter. He finally turns again, watches the audience members watching. Their delight hits him. There's something simply inescapable about their joy. They look giddy, transported, on cloud 9. Damien's tears are fading. His still watery eyes turning from the audience around him and looking once again onto the screen. The anger is gone now, and the sorrow with it. What remains, instead, glistening through the residual moisture in those eyes, is some strange alchemy of heartbreak and awe, and joy and pride and regret and the sheer incredulity at the madness of it all. Through the residual moisture in those eyes is some strange alchemy of heartbreak and awe and joy and pride and regret and the sheer incredulity at the madness of it all.